good evening. Thank you very much. Sorry for being a minute over schedule on the start time. I was waiting for one of our other actual members to turn up. We've got a very good turnout this evening for many different purposes, I'm sure. So we'll start off straight away. So this evening is the 7th of November. Please make sure your mobile devices are not going to disturb us. And we'll crack on. The first agenda item is the minutes. To look at the minutes from last time and are they an accurate record? So this is really the committee members here. Any comments? Any concerns? Or are you happy to sign these as a record?
Propose those, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Frenchman. The next thing I'd like to do very quickly is introduce you to Philippa Page, who's our support for this committee. It's the first time we've seen Philippa, even though she's been looking after this for a while, since Wendy Craven moved to a different role. And this is Philippa here. We won't go around obviously and make introductions, but I wanted to make sure you knew Philippa was. So that's that. The next item on the agenda is apologies for absence. Any apologies for absence? Councillor Brown, thank you. We haven't had an apology from Councillor Pritchard, which is why I was looking for him outside, particularly given that he's got an item on the agenda. We'll hopefully he's here shortly. Declarations of members' interests. Didn't expect anybody. Meetings apolitical. No particular arrangements in place. What I'd like to do now is basically notify a request to switch the order of the agenda. Councillor Guildford has to go to a parish meeting this evening, and she was down as item number 6 on a very long agenda. Councillor Guildford has negotiated with various other members to see if she can go earlier, and they've accepted. So I basically propose that Councillor Guildford goes now, followed by Kevin, followed by the report from the corporate plan, which Julie does. Everybody happy with that, our team?
No.
Very good. Thank you. Actually, that's very nice having only the members here and the rest of you being observers. Actually, it's quite handy. Good. Right. So you'll recall you've all been invited to send in questions and so on. Councillor Guildford is going to update us on Daventry North. We can have spend a good 30 minutes, if not longer, on this section. You've all had the opportunity as members to send in questions, which we had quite some time ago, and this is also partly in relation to another scrutiny assignment, which is looking at street scene and how we can make improvements, and how this new contract is going to support that, or this venture. So I'm going to hand over now to Councillor Guildford to talk us through this. What I'd like to do actually is have you do the presentation, and then we'll take questions at the end. That way we can make sure you can get away from the parish meetings.
Okay.
Thank you, over to you.
Okay, so good evening everybody, and thank you for allowing me to change the agenda. I've tried to keep the presentation at a strategic level because there's lots of questions and a lot of operational questions, and I acknowledge there's a balance to be had between the strategic and operational. On this first slide, I just want to point out that Daventry North is the logo that's been designed, and that's the logo of the joint venture hub. So if we go to the next slide, progress to date. So there's the bullet points there, but basically we've designed the service, Daventry District Council, and North will be delivering it for us. That's the joint venture. The bullet points to zoom in are that the service resources and costs have been confirmed. The legal documents have now been signed, and hopefully none of you have been asleep at council, because you should know the depot works have started and got underway. So that's where we are in the progress to date.
Very well.
The joint venture itself is a true partnership. It's not a subcontractor relationship like it was with Amy. And I'm pleased that I can announce, and as you should all know, that there's going to be a cross-party liaison board which helps influence service delivery going forward. So why North's a joint venture? Again, you can read the bullet points, but basically we all know we needed to get more control. We've learnt from previous lessons, and this should be a partnership. Also, with all the financial constraints, we need to have something that we can grow a commercial business within, so that it can help sustain continued delivery of the services, as opposed to having budget cuts and looking how services can be reduced. It's a joint venture, profits are split 50-50 with Norse. So again, by having a 50-50 split, it's a true partnership. The questions, we've got the questions listed. There were similar questions, lots of questions. So you did ask the chair to try and keep them so you could relate them back to the questions. So the next few questions and slides describe the terms, the governance issues. So we've got the Daventry Norse, we've got the legals, which is made up of the articles, the shareholders agreement, the services agreement and the recyclers agreement, all above my pay scale. But we have professional assistance in this, and that has what's helped us put those articles together, the legals. If we look at the governance, it's a separate company limited by shares. There's a board of directors, again announced to council there'll be two directors, one being the chief executive and one being the portfolio holder, which again gives it the level of decision making that can go forward with Norse. If we look at the liaison board next, I thought long and hard about this liaison board, and I looked first at skills as opposed to people. So I thought, and again many of your questions were around communications, so I thought it was important that we had the portfolio holder for communications on there, so Wayne's part of there. And again, what happens at the county impacts upon us. So I put forward Adam, who's a county councillor. Then we wanted experienced councillors that have been here a long time. Hopefully you won't be offended by this, Deanna, but Deanna is the experience.
You still have a red flag.
And then we wanted the cross-party, and we had invited Wendy.
Councillor Guthrie, for the sake of order, when you're referring to them, can you refer to them as a councillor name?
Right.
Because obviously we're recording it as well, so we know they're councillors in that role as well.
Right, so Councillor Wayne Howard for communications, Councillor Adam Brown for the county connection, Councillor Deanna Eden for the experience, and then the cross-party was Councillor Randall and Catherine Lomax.
Councillor Lomax.
Okay, sorry. And again, of that mix, I wanted to get a rural and town mix, because it was important the whole district was covered. And I do know we've had issues more so in the town, so 3 of those are town members, and then remainder rural. So if we now go on to the services, these are services we've told Norse we want them to deliver. So we say how often we want things doing, etc. It's different again from the Amy contract, which was what we call an outcomes contract, where we said we wanted to achieve this, which has not worked very well for the council having an outcomes contract. So we've reverted back, and we've got the joint venture vehicle, and it's more a vehicle of saying what we want doing, how we want doing it. Obviously we're aiming for the gold standard, but I will put a health warning here, in that it is a finite amount of resources we have to work with. We have to get that balance. Yes, we're putting more resources in, but with the financial constraints we do have to get that balance. If we go on to further questions that were raised, the main one here that I would like to zoom in on is the impact of the county council. We know the budget cuts that they're going through. And
Councillor Pritchard's right. Thank you. Next needs to find a seat. Thank you.
So, as I said, if we zoom in on these bullet points on the county council.
It's okay, we can snuggle in somewhere, Councillor Pritchard. We've got a bit of a full house this evening. Yeah.
Okay.
Carry on, please.
Carry on. So, we will have to look in light of recent events how that will impact on our frontline service. And particularly, we know we've had the element of the threatening task to withdraw recycling credits, but we need to work with the County Council on that. The risk register will come on to later on. The mobilisation, so we're having daily communication, weekly meetings, internal working groups and project board meetings once they're set up. So that's the way of going forward. The risk management, this is an example of the risk management register, and you know, it is a big frontline service and there's too much detail really to bring everything to the forefront. I just wanted to give you an example of the sort of things on the risk management register. There's some more questions there regarding the communications. One particular one I wanted to answer is yes, there will be no one waiting more than 3 weeks for a collection. There is a magnitude of change happening. I could have done numerous slides on this, but we've tried to answer all the questions. I'm sure there'll be many more as we go through this evening. So if we go on to the next one, again that's answers and questions. I will just zoom in because I know from Councillor Frenchman that there is an issue that we have regarding the schools and the collection at schools. It's very intricate and we are looking into it, but it is something we will have to look at as a council. If we then go on to the mobilisation, and again, and I know I've said it already previously, it's the communication plan that's most important. This is a change in service. It's not just a change in who delivers the service, but a change in service. So there are all the various plans. So if we flip on to the next plan, we've got the communications plan, which we've got detailed up there. We've already started doing that communication. I've done myself, I've done TV, I've done radio, we've got things on the website, we're using Daventry calling, so we need to get the message out there and educate as well the residents. Then we've got the landscape plan, various items in the landscape plan there. A couple of things to point you to is we did go out to all the parishes across the district to see who would like to take over some frontline services. On the churchyards, I can report that Byfield, Long Buckby and most probably Wheaton have all opted to take on caring for their own churchyards. That will just leave the council with the Holy Cross. I think the town was given the option to take that on, but decided it's best to stay.
Can you clarify the town being
Daventry Town Council.
Daventry Town Council.
Declined. If we then go on to the cleansing plan.
I'd like to ask a question.
Do you mind noting the town council until the end? Yeah, we'll take them then in open forum. Thank you.
If we go on to the cleansing plan next. Something to highlight here, which surprised me. Again, we went out to all parishes regarding who would like to do their own little picking. And the budget was carved up as per the size of the parishes and ranged from, under £100 to, I don't know if there was any up to 1,000 or over. But in the region of 20 councils have opted to undertake their own litter picking. So that will be a new venture, working in partnership with the parish councils where they undertake the cleansing. We go on to the next one. It's with regard to the transition to Norse. How will that work? So we have the mobilisation plan. So we have a monitoring regime, we have a transitional plan, we've got the new bins and stickers, we've got audits, all the things you'd expect to see in the transition period and mobilisation period. Again, there's a lot, so it's 2 slides on mobilisation. We will have to deal with complaint handling during the transition process. There will be complaints as residents learn the new system as we have the transition to us. So we need to make sure that we monitor the handling, see what's happening and act on any analysis from it. If we then go on to the performance monitoring process, yes, there's the traditional KPIs, but what we've got to remember is Norse is us. It's not a subcontractor. Norse is us. We're monitoring ourselves. The next slide talks about the responsibilities. So we have the health and safety, the burials, the education, all the different things that we will be looking in performance areas at. Before I go on to the last slide, well, at the end of the presentation, we did have some late questions in that I haven't put up on the slides because they're in relation to staff. So I thought I'd just answer those face to face. Around the staff, I can confirm the existing staff working at Daventry will all transfer to Daventry Norse under 2P, except for perhaps a few senior people who will be given jobs elsewhere in Amy.
Yeah.
There will be a full pre-transfer consultation with staff to understand any issues or concerns they may have. I believe, and so do others, and I do still keep in contact with the crews. You know, they stop me in the streets as I go shopping in the Daventry town, and I think the majority who've spoken to me are pleased that it's coming back to the council, to the council's control. The consultation has to, under legislation, include union representatives. We don't know yet if there's any redundancies will be needed. It's too early in the process. We only have partial 2P information, but we're seeking to fully understand it. And if redundancies are required, you know, the normal procedure is we try and find jobs elsewhere. I can't promise there won't be redundancies, but we will work round to try and ensure that there aren't. Cleansing is a resource-driven service that the council decides each year what resources to put into it. One of the questions was around the deep cleaning, what could be done. So at the various woods or, you know, jobs that we think, oh, that area is getting a bit untidy. Then at the liaison board, we've discussed it, and we'd recommend to the Norse board that perhaps we need to divert resources to that. And the last question was about the annual charge for garden waste, whether and how the waste will be monitored. The waste should be monitored. I think the question was around how we would monitor whether they were paying for the garden waste. I think the intention is that we use the current garden waste for refuse or garden waste for the garden waste. And then we'll look at what's being put in the black bin, because the option is some of those that may decide not to take forward a chargeable, then yes, we can see what's going through that process. And there'll be periodic checks on the composition in my day. And, you know, we engaged Deborah or Rappel, someone who followed bins behind, took some sample bins and did some analysis of the composition. To sit here and go through what's been proposed would take hours, but hopefully that's given you a flavour of the different elements that you've all asked the questions, pre-questions. I thought it was best to keep the presentation small and concise, because I'm sure you're all just going to bombard me with questions now. So,
thank you. Before, thank you, Councillor Guildford. Before I open to the floor, let's do this in an orderly manner. Through the chair, thank you. I've got two questions I'd like to kick off with. The first one is this concept of resource-driven.
yes.
I don't think I'm clear what we mean by resource-driven versus outcome-driven.
Okay.
I guess the real question is this whatever resource-driven is it actually going to make a difference on the ground to the residents and their perceptions of the cleanliness, tightness and good order in this area? So actually I'm a bit concerned resource-driven is some kind of gobbledygook, and I'd like to be able to tell us actually what that means in practice, please.
So in practice, you know, you could have a contract that says that, you know, you mow the grass every week. So that grass, regardless of how long it's got, the contract would say mow every week, but there's some areas that may not need grass mowing every week. So resource driven is, rather than wasting resources doing something that needn't be done, is that we direct the resources to where we actually need to do the work.
Good. So can I stop you there? How do you do that? Take the example of the grass. If it's on a rota basis, that's fine. So it might get cut, like say, every once a month. But if it's not, how do you know how long the grass is in order to mobilise somebody to cut it? What monitoring do you do in order to know where to allocate the resources?
I wouldn't say we're down to that level of deciding how it's going to be done. I've explained the concept, but we're too early in the process to give the detail. I can give examples of what I've done in the past when I was responsible. Is that, you know, if you had complaints coming in about a specific area, that may be a reason to look at that specific area and see if that area needs mowing more over another area. So that's just one element. Another element could be if there's going to be supervisors or inspectors monitoring. So there are different ways of doing it, but that's the concept.
Okay, so it's also a principle in that regard. Okay, I've got more questions. We're going to open it to the floor. I'm going to kick off with Councillor Randall.
Yeah, thank you. Just from members of the public, different things that they've asked me is, first of all, if they paid for a garden waste bin and somebody stole it, would they have to pay for a replacement, and what would stop that person then using that bin and not paying for it? So that was one of the questions I've asked. Two, a lot of flats and areas haven't got any food recycling, and they are really concerned, and there's no room for extra bins either, and they're really concerned about smells. 3 weeks in a bin, especially when some of the areas are actually enclosed in a storage area. So that was two of the main ones that I've been asked really.
Thank you, Councillor. Do you want to take those, or do you want a few more questions, then take a little block of them?
I can take them.
Okay, take them individually.
Otherwise
okay.
I'll go out my So paying for the bin if it's stolen, well, again, it's too much of a detail operationally, but the principle would be, I'm sure we've got to make sure it's not open to abuse, because I do know from previously that people who generated, say, 2 lots of garden waste bin would ring up and say, I've lost my bin, can I have another bin? And then we'd end up collecting 2 bins. So yes, there needs to be a process put in place, but I can't give you the detail at this point in time. We're not that far ahead.
Is it the case actually that some of the procedures we've had beforehand can simply be ported across anyway? should there really even be a need for a change in procedure for such a bin anyway?
Well, the policies would normally, the policies are agreed at the council, so normally with the AMI contract, there's policies we have at DDC that shouldn't change when it transfers to the new vehicle delivery. That doesn't mean that the liaison board or myself as portfolio holder, if I'm getting a lot of the same issues, that it's an issue we can bring up and say, right, let's look at that. Regarding flats, there's the weekly collection of food. Yes, I know some of the flats haven't got the facilities. Part of the AMI contract was that they were meant to put in new ways of collecting different elements of waste. That hasn't happened. But there are various ways. So again, it's another item you can discuss at the liaison board. Yes, it's at the operational detail, but we can discuss the concept and say, look, can we divert resources this year to trying to get that in at the flats?
Thank you. I'll take a comment from Maria, then I'll come
Just
back.
to confirm that where people have managed to finagle additional bins, that I'm aware of cases where my team who do waste enforcement have gone and removed them because, for example, somebody with lots of animals might get extra brown bins or extra general waste bins. So that is already in place. It's just that it's not that commonplace that members might not be aware that already happens, and we'd envisage that carrying on happening.
Thank you. And more on the subject of, actually, before we get into bins themselves, the physical artefact, what is the situation with bins currently on order, for instance? So is there a period perhaps where we won't allocate new bins because we're so close to the new contract, such as perhaps new developments and this kind of thing, or if there are been missing bins, or still continue to issue bins, and at what point we stop that, etc.?
At this point in time, I think we are still issuing them, but as we get nearer to the close of the contract, we are going to have to look at that. But the intention in the new service delivery is that, you know, we are using the bins that are there anyway. So.
Okay, so when we're a bit closer, there might be perhaps new houses come on stream, etc., may have no bins for a period. So
no, I wouldn't say there'll ever be a position where there's no bins.
Yeah, if I can assist. Currently, the Environmental Services contract requires AMI to provide each new house with a black bin, a garden waste bin and recycling boxes. The only one of those that will become redundant are the boxes. The intention, subject to council approval, is that we will provide all households with a new recycling bin, which is a change from where we were, but I think it makes sense in the context of what seems to be a very high take-up of garden waste services elsewhere. So the garden bins will continue to be used for that purpose with some kind of effectively MOT sticker on saying, I've got a year's worth of service here. Yeah. The residual bins will continue to be used for their purpose. So the only things that will be redundant are the boxes. Now, in other places where councils have made this kind of switch, they've said to residents, you can keep your box if you want, and most people do because they find it useful. So we don't anticipate a big problem. AMI have asked us, could they stop delivering boxes? And we said, well, make us a suggestion as to how you're going to handle the properties which are not served. And thus far, they haven't made a suggestion.
Because of course, there's still properties coming on stream, of course,
Absolutely.
to look at amongst new developments. Maria, then we'll go back to the councillors for questions.
On the very topic of boxes, I know because I listened in at the call centre for an hour this week that they're out of stock on boxes. This does happen occasionally, and the script in the call centre is when people they automatically tell them all about it, get it all set up when they're phoning to register that they've moved into a new property, and they advise people while you're waiting for your boxes, you can recycle using carry bags, just leave it out in the normal way. So the lack of a box, whilst undesirable, doesn't prevent people from recycling.
Okay, thank you. Let's. I think Councillor Wren had a hand up in the section, so we'll go to you first, and I'll go back on this way.
Okay.
Yeah. Go for it.
Basically, for clarification, will the whole of the Holy Cross churchyard come under this contract?
What do you mean by that?
Well,
it's a closed churchyard, so
yeah.
it will come under the North contract because
right.
we're retaining.
Why I'm asking was a little while ago, I went round to, because I've got grandparents there, and grandparents, and the grass was very long in some areas, and there were some men working there, and I said to him, are you cutting down the bottom? And he said, no, we don't do that, that's Northampton County Council. And then it was a weekend, and I forgot to ask you about it when I saw you.
I'm not aware of the county council having any responsibility.
Chairman, that sounds very odd. My best guess is there is a piece of graveyard that runs off down and emerges with a highway verge.
Yes.
So I wonder if that's what the issue is. But certainly,
You mean where they took the wall down?
yeah, the
Yeah,
churchyard is
well,
our responsibility to maintain.
There's two areas I was basically asking, because that was one of them, yes. And the other bit was that goes down behind the church. There's a pathway goes down.
Yeah.
And we had to walk through grass about that long to get to my grandparents' grave. And he said, no, they don't do that.
I
I
think,
haven't been
Chairman,
back since to see.
happy to have the detail outside the meeting. is
Okay,
what
yeah,
it's
that's it.
Okay.
Follow up on that one at the meeting. So we'll keep it, any other questions? So we've got some more hands up. So Councillor Frenchman next.
Couple of quick questions. Are there any, or will there be any outstanding issues with Amy? Or do you envisage it being a clean break?
I think you know the answer to that.
Well, I was wondering how they will be dealt with after, when they're no longer, we've got no power over them after whenever it is.
Well, they will cease on the
Yes.
June
So once
date.
that happens, all the problems go away, do they?
I wouldn't say that, no. I'd be lying if I said.
Are there any particular risk areas that you can foresee at the moment we need to be aware of?
Well, the only risk area for myself is as we get nearer and nearer contract end date, I think this is the most important risk that's got to be managed, is they will constantly step back. So we've got to ensure that we monitor and manage them as best we can, because you all know of the Amy relationship, that the transitional period from and to as best we can.
And the other quick question was, if somebody doesn't pay for a garden waste bin, will they just put it in their black bin?
They're able to, yes.
They're able to, so what's the point of having a garden waste bin that
Because
you pay for?
it will be recycled, and they can also take it to the tip if they wish for it to be recycled.
Should they not be allowed to fill their black bin with garden waste, because that just seems to defeat the object?
Yes, but a lot of households will prefer to keep the garden bin. On the neighbouring authorities that have introduced this, then the uptake has been fairly high. So we don't envisage there being that issue.
There's also a practical point, isn't it? If you've got a big garden and a lot of waste, you're never going to get it all in your black bin, but if you've got a tiny garden, you probably get it all in, it all rots down anyway, as long as it's put properly. I've got quite a few councillors queued up. I'll come to over this side first, I think. Councillor Paul next, and I'll work way back round, but I have acknowledged your hand, Councillor.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Joe, for a concise report. Be grateful if we could have that zapped down the wire to us via email. Probably around the table of members, Joe and I are the only ones that were around when Enterprise took over. My concern is to separate complaints from service calls. I know we have an excellent CRM system and call centre. I do think it would be advantageous if members were shown the call centre, shows exactly what happens, and can see the CRM system in action, because without a shadow of a doubt the call centre is going to spike in that first 5, 6, maybe 10 working days, and then it will drop back down to normal after that. That's purely and simply from experience, but I welcome everything else. Thank you, Chairman.
Thanks, Councillor Paul. Concise for you, very good. Good recommendation at the end.
I would just say
yeah.
to that chair that there are, for when the contract goes live, extra staff lined up to help with the amount of calls.
So you've got a resource plan in due course. Great, thank you. The next hand was Councillor Ritchie.
Thank you, Chair. There are actually 2 or 3 things I would just like to follow up on. Some of them I did ask beforehand, and I start on union negotiations. You replied that of course you're obliged to negotiate with with the trade unions who represent the staff. My question though was what discussions have taken place and whether agreement have been reached, or are there outstanding issues on which there is disagreement, in which there may be acrimony? How is that relationship moving?
Thank you. Before we answer that question, I don't know if there's just one thing. You know, the equivalent of pink papers. I'm not sure if there's anything we can't say. So if there is, just sign alerts to that. But otherwise, Councillor Guildford, go ahead, answer what you can in terms of the overall conceptual area.
Well, again, we're really at the start of the process. What we have at the moment is the to-be list, which has yet to be agreed. And once we know who's on the to-be list, then negotiations would have to commence.
But there haven't been negotiations, there hasn't been a meeting and an exchange of views with the union?
I'm
By
not...
Chairman, not yet. As Councillor Guildford has said, we only received the cheapy list, what, I forget now, 6 weeks ago or something. It doesn't have the names on. We're still seeking to clarify who is actually proposed to come to us, but there is a stage and order process we'll go through, which will include union engagement. I hope there won't, in a sense, need to be a negotiation, but we'll see, there might be. But we're certainly not at the point yet where that would be appropriate or indeed possible.
Actually, I'd like to ask a question linked to that, Councillor Richard. How does it work in terms of the dissolution of the relationship with the Borough Council? Because there'll be workers that are pulled across the two anyway, etc. So how do you manage the allocation? Is it people working on our area?
I understand that we have been able to determine from the to-be list that, you know, those that were transfer of undertaking, help me
it might be worth getting a technical explanation of this if you're not familiar with the labour laws, etc.
Chairman, just for members' benefit, TUPE is the Transfer of Undertakings Protection of Employees Regulations, the last set being, I think, 2007 or 2006. Not to correct me on that. The provision of the regulation says that someone who is permanently and substantially engaged in work transfers to the new employer is ineligible for a transfer. In this case, it's pretty clear that everybody based at the Daventry depot is permanently and substantially working on Daventry work. The cross-boundary staff, as far as I can see, will not fit that definition, whereas they will fit the definition for Northampton because the vast majority of their work will be built for Northampton. So I would expect, in very simple terms, everyone whose job base is at High Marsh Depot in Daventry to come to us, and everybody who's at Westbridge to go to Northampton. I'd say the only exception is the few number of staff that Enterprise will likely take away and use our
and they'll really put in their own organisation accordingly. Thank you. Hopefully that answers your question, Councillor, in terms of the technical to pay. Councillor Ritchie, would you like to continue with your question?
Yes, there are two issues which perhaps I'll dig together. We've talked a bit about the green bins. I'd be interested to know what your estimate is of the percentage of households that will want to pay the £35, and whether there is any monitoring that is going to be done, therefore, of what actually happens to green waste. How much green waste will not be recycled, but will simply go to landfill, and how much green waste will simply end up dumped somewhere. You know, what are the plans to actually monitor what happens at present and what will happen after the change takes place? Can I just add in, because it might what a lot of people do. I've come across a lot of concerns about the fact that services in the past haven't tackled what I think is described the hard to reach areas. The areas of, you know, of shrubbery and bushes. I think I may have mentioned likes of the, you know, the woodlands along Admiral's Way, or some of the places where I'm afraid there is always a lot of dumping of beer cans and lager cans, small scale fly tipping, and where that actually fits in to the, you know, to the programme of work.
Good, thank you, Councillor Ritchie.
I think I did touch on that in the presentation. That is where the, you know, if we're getting information, data, intelligence, whatever you want to call it, that there's an issue in an area, that at the liaison board we will discuss that area, and then we would look to see if resources needed diverting there. So that was a simple one. So back to your first question, which is a bit harder to answer. But I think it's this 50 to 75% take-up that has been in the other areas that have already introduced this. As for the monitoring, that is already in place and will not really be different, because we have fly tip monitoring, and if we see, a peak in suddenly a lot of fly tips in grass, then we will see that, and that will come through the normal monitoring processes, and we'll deal with it through there.
And Councillor Guildford, with respect to that, if you do see an increase in a particular activity, in reality, how flexible will the resource be to mobilise to fix the problem?
Well, again, it's all down to that balance in the first instance of balancing what we need as a council against our financial constraints, and then two, because it's a partnership and it's not the traditional subcontractor relationship, we influence where the resources are deployed. So we would ask Norse, as I said right at the beginning, we tell Norse what to do, whereas with the current contract, we've had it, that's what the contract is. So the whole concept, principle, whatever you want to call it, is changing.
So can I just add to that? Yeah. One of the things we're working very closely with Norse is the idea of all their skills, all their staff being multi-skilled. So to take, for instance, the bin crews that go out to every house and every part of the district, what we're working on is them reporting anything that they see on the way. So they might see a fly tip, they might see an overflow dog bin, etc. So they might see a street that's got littering or whatever. So that as they're going out and about, there will be this constant reporting, which kind of gives us much more monitoring throughout the whole district all the time. So there's this constant, if they see something, it won't be, well, I'm a bin crew, I'm nothing to do with grounds, or I'm nothing to do with litter, etc. It's about, they're all being multi-skilled, and we're working on the reporting systems within their own BARTEC system and their own systems, whereby that instantly comes back to the depot.
Can we go one step further, so that they can stop and say they can report something, but are they empowered and skilled to actually do something? Because that's the problem we see now. You have totally different work crews doing different tasks, even though the job might be next to
That's part of the training plan, and that's part of what and it also makes the jobs more interesting for all the staff, because they're not just about one thing, they've got ownership of the whole service.
So multi-skilled, able to fix things as well as report things. Let's come back over here, thank you. We'll take a few more minutes and then we'll release you, Councillor Guildford, for your meeting. Councillor McCrory, you had your hand up there, but you want to ask a question now?
Yes, please. I did have my hand up. Unfortunately, Councillor Frenchman leapt in and asked me a question, so I think below one. I've got a series of questions on the subject of pensions, so if I just reel them off, you can attack it how you think best. Can you tell us what pension arrangements exist currently for the staff that are likely to TUPE across to Daventry Norse? Has Daventry Norse applied successfully yet for membership of the Northamptonshire Pension Fund? What effect will the transfer have on Daventry's pension, Daventry District Council's pension costs? And will we have to assume any liability for pension strain for any AMI employees that have previously been allowed to retire early in the course of conducting our contract?
Well, in all honesty, that again is above my pay scale, and I don't know the intricate answers.
I was expecting you to pass that one over to someone else.
So I'm happy to pass that.
Chairman, I'm happy to have a go at that.
But before you do something, I think the point is, Councillor Guildford, you're the portfolio holder, it's not above your pay scale. You represent this area, however, we're perfectly happy for you to pass it on. You always get a decent answer off Simon as well.
Yes,
it's not above your pay scale.
I'm not trying to shirk responsibility here.
Yeah,
I will take
you have to take ownership of the questions.
I'll take ownership of the questions, but I have to defer to a more professional.
Thank you. Yeah. Okay, Simon, do you have an answer?
Starting point, I think, is the pension liabilities of the staff who originally transferred from Daventry to what is now AMI, Enterprise Managed Services Limited, has effectively remained with DDC throughout. Although they're currently in a part of the pension fund by themselves, we have maintained liability for those pensions. So the increase in costs, if there's an underfund, is Daventry's problem, is council's problem. If there is a surplus, that's our benefit. So that hasn't changed. And the intention is that the legal agreements are such that will continue. there are, I think, 21 members of staff who transferred out of Daventry and therefore have preserved LGPS rights out of a workforce of, I don't know now, 60, 80. It's a fairly small proportion anyway. Those rights obviously will be preserved again, and Daventry, this council, will have the liability to pick up the difference between a stakeholder pension and the LGPS cost, whatever it is, at any point in time. So that liability, which is inherently one that belongs to the council, will remain with the council until gradually, through a process of natural attrition, it departs.
Thank you, Simon. Does that begin to answer your question, Councillor McCullough?
It goes a long way, yes.
Very good, thank you. I know you've only got a moment or two. We are respectful of your other meeting. Councillor Orcutt, did you have a question?
I did, yeah.
Please.
So a very quick one, first one's very quick, is at one point on the presentation you say that we'll make a profit. How do we...
50-50.
Yeah, how do we make a profit? Is it income generating this?
Well, I
partnership?
mean, the garden waste, for example, is...
Oh, right, okay.
So, and it's hopefully this will be a commercial model for if we go into trade waste and develop the trade waste, there could be income generation there.
So the setup is set up that will take advantage of income generating
When it was
opportunities.
in-house, before, we had an in-house MOT garage, there's opportunities there commercially to generate income in the way it's been set up.
Okay.
Another one is, obviously our roads and the rubbish on our roads is really a frustrating thing, I think, for us all in the county as we drive around, what is one of the most beautiful counties in the county, to see all the garbage and rubbish, which is pretty much deposited there by the very people that live here, which is a frustrating thing. Is there a joined-up strategy? Because obviously some roads are highways, and some roads are ours, our districts. So I take it there is a joined-up strategy with highways to ensure that our roads get picked up. Can we confirm there is a partnership between the two, between Norse and the county, to ensure our roads are clear of rubbish?
I think that even if we're talking about Norse and us now, but even in the past, we tried to work in partnership with the county council, for example. They can let us know when there's road closures happening, and then that's an opportunity to collect and cleanse that road.
And that will continue with the new contract.
Hopefully.
Thank you, Councillor. I'm going to take one last question. That's from Councillor Randall, who had a hand up, and then I'm going to let Councillor Guildford go.
Yeah, I think really that part of it's been answered already, but it was on 2P of staff across. Obviously, a lot of staff have, how can I say this? Like, you could have two different crews collecting. One crew collect, and they do as they should, put the bins back where they're supposed to, and another crew can just throw them all everywhere. And if we're 2P and that staff across, how do we ensure that going forward that it is we bring that professionalism back into once it's back under our hat again, how we ensure that those crews are retrained to do as they should be, or like Councillor Eden said, knowing where they're supposed to be, cutting the grass or whatever else.
Sounds like a straightforward question, Councillor.
Yeah, again, it's going back to that partnership relationship, and also that it's us telling Norse, so we can say, we've had complaints in this area, can you look into it? And then obviously Norse are a reputable, the county, Norfolk is it, county council. They have a high reputation as well, more so than Amy's reputation had been. And I think it will be a better relationship going forward on managing all those types of issues. And monitoring.
Good. Answer your question.
Well, I was just thinking it's a joint company now, so shouldn't it just be their responsibility? It's supposed to be Daventry Law's responsibility.
I think that there has to be some way to talk about the entity that is short-handed. I suppose that would be one of the things we grapple with. It is us, but it's not. But it's not.
And again, we touched on earlier that there was the training and the multi-skilling and all that. So you're right, it's been partially answered already.
And that should be independent from the 2-pay process. That's the point. So basically, you 2-pay them across, and then you concentrate on the performance and competence.
Correct.
Thank you. What I would like to say is, hopefully, councillors have been illuminated by this session. We have a discussion later in the meeting about the rolling work programme where we call in portfolio holders. It may well be useful to actually have Councillor Guildford back again.
This evening.
Probably we'll let her have the rest of the season to go start, but perhaps in April or sometime. But for now, we'll finish there. Thank you very much, Councillor Guildford. Much appreciated, and the team will.
Excuse me, and thank you for allowing me to go first.
Very good. Right, if anybody wants to go, now go. Otherwise, it's much more ahead of us. Thank you. Probably stay there. Okay, so the next item on the agenda is Kevin gives us an update for newer members or members that are visiting this evening. Kevin comes once a year and gives us an update. And he's very patient. He normally goes very early in the agenda. The document which he's going to speak to us about is on page 11 in the pack. And Kevin, we're going to hand over to you now to talk to us. Thanks again for your patience.
Thank you, Chair. I'm very much aware of the length of the agenda you've got tonight, so I don't propose to speak through the report. Members all had an opportunity to read it beforehand, and so for the matter of brevity, the only thing I would say is this is longer than I would normally produce. However, it's been made clear to me that a number of members weren't quite aware of the scope of the partnership unit, so I've attempted to expand it there to cover that, to show the breadth. So in many cases people have considered it to be around about community safety partnership, and that's it, full stop. So actually I hope I've managed to show a greater breadth of the work that the partnership unit does. The major thing that I was trying to get across as well was the relationship with South Northamptonshire. Obviously South Northamptonshire Council no longer put money into the Community Partnerships unit. They've expanded with their partnership with Cherwell District and using the community safety team who are in Cherwell District to cover community safety with South Northants. So now our arrangement is that the Community Partnerships unit just works at Daventry District Council, we're just employed by Daventry District Council. However, we're still in the joint community safety partnership with South Northants, so all the operations of the community safety partnership are joint. So members of my team will run some parts of the community safety partnership, while members of South Northampton Cherwell's team will run other parts. I would say we were supposed to have finished the transition period some 6 to 8 months ago. I wouldn't say that that's actually a proper reflection of where we are. Our colleagues in South Northampton are in a very steep learning curve, and I've lent them some crampons and some ropes. It's not been made easier by the fact that the community safety manager from Cherwell and South Northampton has retired. He'll be going in a few weeks' time, and look at panic in the eyes of the community safety officer was apparent. I have offered South Northampton that we will extend the previous arrangement to them if they'd like, and they can purchase our services. So far they've demurred, but I'll leave the offer on the table for them. So there is still some settling down to do, but we are hearing the right noises and the right attitude from our colleagues in South Northampton. But it's still some work to do on that side of things. In terms of crime figures, obviously councils all receive the performance bulletin every month. The one thing I want to say, that one of the things that a lot of members have been interested in the past has been the public perception data. We've been having conversations as the Community Safety Network across the county with the university, the Institute of Policing and Crime and Justice, because they're the ones who are doing the survey on behalf of the police. And so we're getting the data from them. We've been a little concerned, it's been very notchy. But we've seen months where everyone's data the public perception has gone up 3 to 4% across the board with no explanation. Now it's always been a fairly volatile data set. Anything that's less than 1.5% I would call normal variance. But basically we've got a rather frank conversation with Dr. Matthew Callender, who's in charge of that unit, and he says that basically they've been seeing smaller and smaller numbers of respondents, so they've been very, very worried about the quality of their data set and standing behind that data. So they have, from October, expanded the way, they've got permission to expand the way they do things. Previously they've just been making telephone calls. random numbers, but trying to put together a good demographic. They've now changed so that they're going to allow people to complete survey response online, and they're also emailing people as well. So they're hoping to get better numbers and therefore get a more robust data set. However, I'm anticipating that when I see the October data, which should arrive any time now, and I've got the crime data already, but the data from the university turns up a few weeks later usually, that I'm going to see a step change. Because if they're going to a completely different model, if they're looking at different numbers, if we had exactly the same data, I'll be very disappointed. So when the next performance bulletin comes out towards the end of this month, members should expect to perhaps see some serious variance in that. Whether it be positive or negative, I'm not going to put any money down. But if it's not a serious notch, I'll be very surprised. But leaving the paper as presented and basically leaving time for questions, I think is probably the best plan.
Thank you very much, Kevin. I had a hand up already from Councillor Frenchman, if you'd like to kick off.
Thank you, Chair. Good report. It was interesting reading, and I thought it was quite useful, especially some of the background information which I wasn't aware of. I was particularly interested in why the perception of antisocial behaviour is going in the opposite direction to the incidence of it. I didn't know whether you had there was any particular reasons or...
I have a couple of theories.
Yeah.
There are two issues, but that with perception data, there's an awful lot of factors that can act on it. So, for example, what we call signal crimes, national data, that the question is about your area, and so the data for reported antisocial behaviour will be for Daventry district. But when people are asked the question, they often think about where they work, as well as where they live, or what they're seeing. If they're looking about crime, rather than just broad antisocial behaviour, they're thinking about what's in the papers and that sort of thing. And if there's a particular issue that hits the papers, for instance, acid attacks, knife crime, very, very rare in Daventry district, I have to say. We had that one acid attack recently, but everyone for that was plotted recently, that's good. But in terms of that, those things will actually unduly influence the responses. The other thing I would say is that we've always had this concern that numbers will go down if people are bothered by antisocial behaviour, is why we take it as a basket of measures, that they may not bother reporting anymore because they don't think there's any point. And so therefore you will have, people will still say when asked, we're bothered about antisocial behaviour, because the numbers will put a lie to that. So we also look at criminal damage as well in terms of that basket, because if something is damaged and you need to make a claim on insurance, you will report criminal damage. And criminal damage is also down. So we've got an interesting conflict there, so we don't really know. I'm hoping that maybe a change to the data set might make those figures more robust and we'll see things moving in that sort of direction. I think, however, a lot of it is to do with dissatisfaction with visible policing. The new service delivery model that police have gone to means that we have far fewer neighbourhood officers. The plan is that those neighbourhood officers will be red ringed, so they will only do neighbourhood work. So smaller numbers of officers should be able to do the job because they won't constantly be extracted to blue light responses. Sergeant Dobbs won't be wrestling with people in Bowen Square on Saturday night because they're drunk and disorderly, and people won't be carrying an investigatory caseload, so they'll just be able to concentrate on that. However, what it means is that in Daventry Town, for example, you now have 2 PCSOs and 2 warrants, 2 police officers, which is far less than we had a year ago, and obviously far, far less than we had when I started this 10 or 12 years ago. So I think people are feeling the effect of that. If you make a 3-9s call, you will get a blue light response. There's more people on response. There's an awful lot of people now being put onto crimes investigation. There's a sort of subset of CID. And there's an awful lot of people working on cybercrime and child sexual exploitation, and of course on prevention of violent extremism. So all that counter-terrorism work takes people away from frontline. The officers aren't visible anymore, but they are still doing police work. That's not visible, and it's almost impossible to actually get that story across. People want to see a cop on their streets, even if nothing's happening on their streets. And the problem, the way Sam Dobbs puts it quite nicely to parish council meetings is, we want to see cops on the streets. If you tell me when you're going to be there looking out your window, and I'll see if I can get someone walking down the street at that moment. I went to a meeting at Brampton's last year about burglaries, and Hutch, who's the PC for that rural patch, was saying, people were saying, well, we never see you. And he said, lovely little anecdote, he gained the whole show. He said, last night you were washing bricks up talent, and he turned to the next person and you were washing so-and-so, because I was in your garden looking through your window, but you couldn't see me. And if you know the Bramptons, you'll know that no one walking down the street will be seen from the house. But I think an awful lot of stuff about data is a way of people protesting that they're not seeing the cops that they used to see. People want to see uniforms, and unfortunately, they're not going to.
So can I just follow up?
Yeah, you can follow it up. I've got some other questions.
On the bottom of page 13, the last paragraph, I have to take slight issue with some of the language that you used, because I think it's slightly disingenuous to say there were just 169 crimes, only 304 were assaults, because I think to the people involved there were actually a lot more than that. So I think that's slightly loose use of the vocabulary there, and I would like to see that amended. And secondly, on the PCSOs, I'm working on an initiative with John Shepherd about getting some sponsored PCSOs. I'm Stratton Ward, so it's Bramptons and Harleston. So I've got Sam on my side on that. And we've got to the point now where we've got money and we're just negotiating with the Chief Constable and the Commissioner to actually allow us to do it.
We have actually had, that's a very good point, I'm glad you mentioned it, because there's some excellent feedback. The Town Council are talking about it as well, that if they're not seeing people, then should they sponsor PCSOs or get street wardens in? And an awful lot of the villages are clubbing together.
There's five parishes in my ward, they're all chipping it, well, we think they're all chipping it, at least 4 of them are. Thank you very much.
Thanks for Frenchman, sounds like a scrutiny or something. I've got a few questions lined up, so I'll come round in order. So, Councillor McWright first, and then others will follow.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've also got a question about the stats, and particularly about paragraph 3.2, where it says the University of Northampton measures public confidence, ... Most recent report shows 53.8% of respondents in the district agree that police and the local authority are dealing with things that matter in their area. Do you know anything about how that survey is done? Is it a simple binary choice of you're satisfied or you are dissatisfied? Or are they gradations of satisfaction? The reason I ask is that the way it's presented, it does rather imply that 46% of respondents are not happy with the way the police and the council are dealing with the things that matter, which is taking it to a different level beyond simply seeing a copper on the street.
It's interesting. It's fairly satisfied, very satisfied, neither, and then slightly dissatisfied, so it's a 5 point. The interesting thing, when I first looked at this data, I noticed that both South Northampton and Daventry district were below county average. South Northampton in particular, which was rather odd. And what I noticed was I went into that data in more detail and found that the neither satisfied nor dissatisfied was higher than the county average by the difference between satisfied and fairly satisfied and very satisfied was below. So if you actually if you looked at our fairly dissatisfied and very dissatisfied, it was the same as the rest of the county. What we were losing out on was people not knowing either way. So it was the middle rank of the 5 that was higher and therefore taking away from the others. We're not getting that level of detail at the moment, but it is a 5 point choice. So the 53.8% is the fairly or very satisfied. We have actually asked Dr. Callender if we can actually get slightly more detail on that, so we can actually see that broken down. Because I found it very illuminating the first time I looked at it, but we haven't had it back since.
So it's not the case that 46% are dissatisfied?
No. Although I can't tell you for sure that it's not, but my previous detail would say that there'll be grades within that.
Okay. Could we have that level of analysis maybe next time?
Thank you. Yeah. So we can. I think that's the same as the previous presentation. More analysis and less description. Councillor Orkin.
Yeah, it's just it's an observation really. You know, we talk about visibility of policing now. In the mid 1990s, that visibility issue was it's misnomer. It's not actually valid because of the very points you raise about the fact that when the cops are on patrol, the people are in their homes, or when the cops are on patrol, the people are at work, and the visibility. And I thought the narrative had changed to accessibility. And I would hope that we would, from this point, move forward and forget about visibility, because it's actually, it's not valid. What is valid is when the community need a cop or a PCSO, are they accessible? Do they know who they are? Do they know what number to phone? All right, and that in itself, if we change the narrative, will actually bring the fear of crime down, because they actually know who to go to.
Yeah.
Now the bonus is that they're seen, but for me that isn't the point. The point is about this accessibility, and to try to gauge that a little bit more. How accessible are our cops and our PCSOs in the community of Daventry? And I would say that would be something to be interested in.
That is the narrative that has been put across, and there's been quite a lot of work with setting up district or parish level fora, online fora, but of course that doesn't work for everybody, we know that, so that there is a question and answer. And it's been started down in Brackley in particular, and they found it very, very effective in their sergeant having a very big online presence, and that's actually eased things up there. So it's been interesting since that started. The figures in South Northants have not suffered the way the rest of the county has. So it's a very valid point that people need to know about that. And I think it might be the time to mention the 101 number, though I'm always reluctant to do so because of that reason. People scoff. The 101 number has got a very bad press, and the trouble is we think that an awful lot of things which aren't 3 9s don't get reported because people give up after ringing 101 and sitting there for 10 minutes. The police have heard that, and they've now put a callback system on 101. If you ring on a mobile, like a lot of call centres, if it's a busy time, you can leave a message and they'll get back to you when they're less busy. So that should be a good thing, but we need people to actually promote that. If it's on a mobile, 101 will actually call you back.
And just the other point is really about the sponsorship of PCSOs, is that we've been through this before. When PCSOs were first introduced in the mid-2000s, is we had a lot of PCSOs being funded by county councils, district councils, and of course it was on a 3-year sort of deal really. It wasn't perpetuity, and there are some caution for that if we are going to take on these people with regard to employing them, eventually there has to be this long-term funding. And the other issue is obviously they are retained by the police force with regard to operational matters. So you could be paying for a PCSO.
No, we've agreed that it isn't. They're not going to be tied to operational matters except for blue light or terrorist emergencies.
Okay, right. And all I'll say, we've been down there, honestly, we've been down there, and as the area commander, I actually had a pull on all my resources, and if I wanted them to be somewhere else, they would go somewhere else. So it's just really about, I think it's great that we have joint funding and partnership funding, but we have been through this before, and I think we've forgotten some of the downfalls of it, although I would be absolutely for it, because it puts more uniform accessibility to our residents.
Thank you, Councillor Robin. I'm going to take one, Councillor Paul had his hand up. I'm going to take one last comment, and then someone's got any burning questions, and then we'll close this section. Councillor Paul.
Chairman, I do apologise for thanking you for not being a member of your committee to allow me to speak. Kevin has mentioned the 101 number. Our Police and Crime Commissioner is absolutely sick to the back teeth of me keep moaning at him regarding the 101 number. It's totally inadequate. Yes, I accept what Kevin has just said about the callback. Yes, we will call you back. They don't say when they're going to call you back. It could be tomorrow, it could be a week later. Proceeds from crime is a pot of money that the Police Commissioner has. I wondered if we are dipping into that for our Safety Community Partnership. I also mentioned that to him. And the other matter which seems to have fallen off the cliff edge in the change of Police and Crime Commissioner are specials, and we allegedly are in possession of several hundred specials. If so, what are they doing, where are they, and is that still an ongoing situation? Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, sir.
In terms of specials, Councillor, it's the new PCC basically abandoned his predecessor's target. He was saying it's not a question of absolute numbers of specials, but how many hours they put in and how useful they can be. I know that I see specials out and about all the time. An awful lot of the roads work, for example, road enforcement for speeding is done by specials. So Community Speed Watch might do first operation if it comes up to the road jag, that we've got an area that's showing people above the 80th percentile, well above the posted speed limit. Then Safer Roads team will look at deploying specials to that area if they can't deploy a van. Specials are often on patrol in Daventry town. There's a few that work on that side and in the rural parts as well. So in following the various police Twitter feeds, you'll see that special sergeants and special constables are tweeting on a regular basis. So we do see quite a lot of them. The question always was, you can go and have 1,600 specials, but how many hours are they doing and what full-time equivalents do they come into? And so I think there's a more sensible dynamic now about actually what effective things they're doing. But they have kept up the idea that the parish special concept has pretty much dropped. But the idea that you can be a special without being a general warrant and being a special within, say, fraud or CID or IT, that side of things, has been one that has carried on. So there are other specials who are backward. So, but yeah, I'm seeing tweets from people who are around and about in Daventry District quite a lot. So.
Good, thank you. I'm going to take one final comment from Councillor Micro to the response.
Thank you. I just wanted to respond to Councillor Poole's comments about 101. 2 to 3 weeks ago I had occasion to use the 101 service and I thought it worked perfectly well. I got a response within what I thought was a reasonable period of time. They were very polite, very courteous. They recorded it, gave me the relevant numbers and turned out and dealt with it. So I don't think that the 101 system is quite the basket case that sometimes we are told.
We've got a straw poll of 50% tonight.
Probably have to agree to disagree on that, but thank you very much for the comment. Okay, thank you, Kevin. Thank you first of all for your patience, and always good to have you along and take those extra questions in the report. Please keep taking on board those extra comments about the depth of analysis and particularly around method, etc. And also some of the tone around the use of only, etc. as raised by Councillor Finchman. Thank you very much for coming this evening. We'll see you next time. So the next item on the agenda is our corporate strategic plan, which was number 4. Now, on this one, this is Julie. So Julie, thank you again for your patience as well. You can get Councillor Guildford back next time. Now on this one, we have, for those of you that are not so familiar with it, we have the corporate plan, we review it. The purpose has always been to look at performance issues, which might give us some areas for future scrutiny. And we do this by exception, unless everybody's got any burning questions. Now, we had switched to a system whereby we see on the screen for a while, but following a discussion from last time, we're reverting to having it in these documents, so you can take it away and also have a look at it. But have a look at it as Julie's walking through it, and if there's any burning questions, please ask. You'll also note you've got an extra guide. The reason being, quite frankly, last meeting was the first of this particular cycle with the data as it's reported, and as members of Scrutiny we're a little bit lost in some of the construction of the targets and the underpinning definitions and whatnot. So this document we have to support us, so unless you're absolutely stupefied by what's in there in terms of here, we'll skip those questions unless it doesn't make any sense, because we do have the opportunity to have a look at that document. This will basically free Julie up to say, here's the drift performance, here's why, and we can address that question accordingly. The other thing I wanted to put to you is, I think it's for the next meeting, Tony, is it? To have a look at saying, have a look for the KPIs for the next cycle and have a look at those at the next meeting. That's correct, isn't it? Could you give us any update on that, please, Tony?
Well, you are correct. We'll be looking at the annual review of the targets, which will feed to portfolio holders in early next year. So I think the next meeting of this committee is in February.
February, yeah.
So if you wish to influence those targets, then probably a useful discussion at your next meeting.
And can we put that on the agenda, please, Tony, for the next meeting? That will work in there. So, if anybody's wanting to say the targets perhaps are not sensible or perhaps they need some sense checking, we can put that in the agenda for next time. But now I'm going to let Julie carry on. We'll time limit this to absolute maximum 8 o'clock, but it could be less, okay?
Okay, just if I start, just to explain with the guidance that we've distributed. You won't get it every time. This is the guidance for the next 3 years.
Please bring it with you, basically. To
No, I didn't mean, what I meant is it doesn't change every time.
Yeah.
It is the guidance now for the next 3 years for the measures that are here. So it doesn't change, it is there, that is it for the whole period of the corporate strategic plan. So just to stress that one, I don't go away and alter it every
You
time.
don't bring it back. And it's also worth noting actually that we discussed this. I think I requested we have it on here in the measures, but it was not, it's not entirely practical. You can see it's quite a chunky document. That way it enables us to go into more detail. Thank you, Julie.
To then clarify the corporate plan itself, we're talking about the end of Q2, which is the end of September. What we've done is that the comments relate to what's happened in the last quarter and a summary of kind of where we are year to date. I'm pleased to say of the 34 measures, we only actually have 2 that are in the red and we have 5 that are amber. So all the rest are green or white, so it's good progress to date. The first one that's in the red is on page 1, which is B1.2, increase in town centre retail and leisure floor space with planning permission due to council action. The original target here of the 13280 does include 500 square metres of space we were hoping to achieve planning for in town centre vision site 3. It is now known that we will not achieve that by the end of the year, and we do know that target, we will not achieve the target by the end of the year because of that. It was hoped by this time that we would have actually achieved the planning permission for what is actually the Henry Booth scheme, which is the 12,780. A revised submission has now been made and is hopefully going to planning very, very soon. To be considered, but hasn't yet actually gone to planning and been approved, hence the target has gone into the red.
Well, Chairman, 22nd of November, that goes to plan.
Thank you, Councillor Paul, it's very helpful. 22nd November.
So that's B1.2.
Let's take these as we always do, so open it to the floor. Do councillors have any questions on this particular, Councillor Ritchie?
Question.
Comment?
Is there a spare papers? For those of us
This exactly is why we had it on the screen, but it actually wasn't working even. It's kind of like detailed and all the rest of it, but there you go, there's some spares. Thank you. Councillor Paul, maybe, can you speak to this at all as well, since you're here? What's with the, what's happening? Give us a bit of detail.
What's happening with?
Here, a bit more detail about the drift.
Well, some of the drift is commercial sensitivity. Other things that come on board are, the change of economic climate. And, with the best will in the world, one tends to make these predictions or realistic predictions. However, I always go back to who would have used their crystal ball and assumed that the big 4 supermarkets, the Sainsbury's, the Asda's, the Tesco's and the Morrisons would have withdrawn their horns so dramatically and changed the face of retail. Several of them cancelling projects, installing projects, etc. And it impacts upon this going forward.
Thank you. And what about what's the status with the PSP then? Can you share any of that with us? What's the progress in this area?
The PSP at this moment in time, I can't share anything with you. I'd be happy to share it with everybody at council.
You'd be happy to share it with everybody at council?
Yes.
Okay, but not this meeting. I mean, most of them would be you can't share it with me because of the status, etc. Do we have any questions, anybody? Let's drift down an issue, it's a key topic area. You have the opportunity. Further questions? If not, go in. Julie, on to the next one, please.
Okay, well the second of the reds is E2.1, which is the amount of waste collected which is not reused, recycled or composted. it's in the red, it's well over target, it will not achieve target by the end of the year.
I'm sorry, I'm a bit confused. May I butt in? At the top it says amber is within 5%. But if you look at E1.2, it's 25% out.
Yeah, I was going to come back to the ambers if you wanted to talk the ambers.
I've noticed all the ambers appear to be more than 5%.
Yeah, the other criteria of going to amber is if we believe that it will reach target by the end of the year. So actually with all of our ambers, part of it's because they're a new target and it's the way they've been profiled, but it's believed that all of them will actually reach target by the end of the year. So they may not be within 5% at the minute, but we believe they will reach target at the end of the year.
So that's the point, expect to meet target.
Yeah.
So
Thank you very much.
it is on the...
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good. If you've got a query, always good to clarify.
So do you wish me to talk about any of the ambers or just go to the other red?
Let's go to the other red then.
Right, the other red is the waste target, which we do talk about every time. I'm sorry to say it hasn't changed, it hasn't improved. The landfill waste is over target, and the target was set by the contractor. It's part of the tender agreement, we cannot change the amount that's there. It has not been achieved and will not be, well, it's expected that this will remain the case, although we do constantly encourage the contractor to try and recycle more and improve their performance.
I'm not minding to take any questions on that one because we've had the presentation.
Contractors is the waste that should be in the landfill.
They are the only two reds. As I said, we have 5 ambers, all of which we do believe it's just where the work is at this point in time, and we do believe we'll actually reach target by the end of the year.
Are there any ambers you want to speak to us about particularly, Julie? Any of those ambers that are less likely to meet it, or do you expect it in all of them? Are there any risks within those ambers?
E1.2, the percentage of council floor space with EPC rating E. The issue there is the works is currently being carried out, works is being done, they won't be reassessed until that's all completed. So it's kind of, you know, it's about timing. So we believe that will be achieved and will not be a problem. So certainly don't have any problems there. H1.1, number of E-enabled services. Again, this is kind of, it takes a while to actually look at services to re-establish them. It's more a question of timing, but we do believe that, you know, it will be met by the end of the year. As is the same with 1.2, increase in access to services using self-serve. Because that's a new target, it's been kind of quite difficult to actually look at, you know, to guess what the achievements will be. But we don't have any...
I think, Chairman, if I could just, because it is my area, that H1.2, as Julie said, it is a new target. We're not quite as confident we're going to get there on that one, but we are doing some more work to promote online services in the coming months.
So you might see that one red in the next...
we're still hopeful we'll get there, but I say we are behind, but we're doing some work to try and improve that situation.
Thank you, Tony. Karen, support?
Well, you know, we're talking about online services, how much of the impact of not having broadband, or even, as Councillor Frenchman says, even a mobile phone signal, impacts upon that target.
Tony, can you answer that? So the consideration of non-connectivity or what have you, or low signal speeds and whatnot, how much impact will that have on the overall targets?
We don't believe it will, Chairman, because that's taken into account when the targets were set. So this is about the majority of our service users, our customers, who are able to access services online. It's about encouraging that take-up.
Good, thank you. That answers the question. Julie, any further ones for you?
No, don't really have anything else to add.
Excellent. Let's take any final questions from councillors. Any members have any queries on any of the targets you've been presented with? So a wonderful opportunity to ask any question about performance issues. Give you another moment to have a look. If not, no, good. We'll move on then. Thank you very much, Julie. Much appreciated. It's a nice short session for you this evening. Now on, and please, members, have a look at the documents and make sure you bring them with you next time. Right, we'll let Julie go. Thank you, Julie. Very good. I always see Julie going as the kind of that point in the agenda where we're kind of into that rolling work programme session. So, now into the rolling work programme. Ordinarily we can have that presented up on the board, but actually let's focus on the work. It's okay, we'll do it shortly. It's okay, we'll do it. I was going to say, but we don't need to at the moment because we can just have a look at this. What I would like to do now is look at assignment 21, which is a project we've been looking at for quite a while. In all honesty, I think it needs a little bit of work on the recommendations actually. We've had some feedback. We brought this one to the table this evening really because the next opportunity is February. Councillor Pritchard's been working on it for quite some time in between a busy schedule, and it's a bit of a moving target of course, and it's a very delicate and complicated issue. But what I'd like to do now is hand it over to Councillor Pritchard to talk us through his report as our usual style, and then once you've given us an overview, talked about the content, your findings, then we'll go through the recommendations. And also we had Maria's comments to take on board. I'm not sure if Maria was going to return, but I know she had a call on customer.
She's left it.
Yeah, she is coming back, but
I sent Julie to look for her as well, but
She disappeared.
thank you.
I think she's next up.
We'll behave in your absence. Right, okay. Maybe just wait 1 second, and then we'll start.
If I may, while we're just waiting, Chair, I don't know if you've seen the Spotlight, which is the members' newsletter. Councillor Auger has written about the new homelessness laws in there. So that was quite interesting, but it's mainly what you've said anyway. That's good.
Okay,
Yeah,
we'll get
good
going.
Yes, we've changed that, so
Good, thank you. And we've also got Councillor Auger here as well, which will also have a conversation. But obviously he is a portfolio auditor, we can't speak as such as a portfolio auditor if you like in terms of influencing, but we can take you on.
Okay.
You understand, yeah. Just get it.
Okay.
We'll tell you if you misbehave. Councillor Pritchard.
Okay, thank you, Chair. When this was raised as a task panel, it was raised by the chairman, and I took it on board with full enthusiasm actually, having encountered some cases of homelessness myself. But the question that was put, are we doing enough to prevent and support homelessness in the Daventry district? And can DDC do more to support the cases of homelessness? I think I quite agree that the recommendation is doing a little bit of work. They were emerging recommendations which need some tidying up. Would you like me to start recommendations or carry on?
Give us a little bit of a flavour of your findings, your method, the sort of research you've done, the study you've undertaken. Sort of bring us to that point over the next few minutes of why we've got these recommendations. So,
okay.
Recommendations last.
All right, fine. Homelessness is a complex and multifaceted social phenomenon. A phenomenon that requires multi-professional and multi-agency approaches. This occurrence is becoming much more prevalent and concerns a wide range of individuals. There's a particular impact upon younger adults, those with chronic ill health, and this must include a parity of esteem between mental health and physical disability. Drug and alcohol dependency, domestic abuse, prior looked after status and financial insecurity have a strong correlation with incidents and are key factors leading to homelessness. Allied to this is the statutory duties of the local authority, legislation that is evolving and operational considerations which must include examination of resources and housing provision. And the report is to refer to national and regional guidance, statistics and recommendations. The Homelessness Reduction Act 2017 will demand that a preventative, proactive approach is combined with a reactive approach to circumstance. The focus of this report will be upon the identification of homelessness, policies and procedures undertaken by local authority, and will highlight the continued need for multi-agency liaison with definitive supported and unsupported housing options. And recommendations have been taken from amalgamation of some scrutiny involving the HRA Act, DD Security Manager and some officer responses, current provision. But fortuitously, Health Watch Northamptonshire undertook a comprehensive scrutiny of Northamptonshire Borough Council processes and responses and incidents of homelessness within the borough. The report was delivered to the Cabinet on the 21st of June. There is limited focus upon Daventry itself, however, the lived experiences of homeless people, service provision, comorbidities and health outcomes reflect those within Daventry. The report is robust and has been an excellent resource for this report, this task panel report.
Sorry, Chair. I'm sorry to. I don't mean to be rude or horrible, but we should have read this. I don't think there's much
Absolutely,
issue.
that's okay. Well, we always follow this procedure where, although you've read the report, we ask the presenter just to talk a little bit about it.
I mean, with respect, you're just reading it out.
Yeah.
So I prefer something a bit more informal. That is your thoughts on the subject.
I was just going to provide introduction and background definition and then move on.
That's fine. Thank you.
That's fine, I understand. You don't want to listen to me dragging on.
There is one thing actually that not everybody in the room would have had. I mean, you could have downloaded it.
It's been circulated with a minute.
Yes, we have as members of the committee directly, but we also have other members as well who haven't got background and be useful for them as attending as well. So, Councillor Roden, I'm not sure if Councillor Roden's been on that a lot, but it'd be useful for Councillor. Exactly. Yes. Yeah. It's just a matter of courtesy, that's all. That's okay. Carry on, please.
No, thank you, Councillor. Just come to the definition now, because it's really important. The definition itself is understood. As explained by the Homeless Charity Crisis, in the broadest sense, homelessness is a problem faced by people who lack a place to live that is supportive, affordable, decent and secure. And whilst rough sleepers are the most visible homeless population, the vast majority of homeless people live in hostels, squats, bed and breakfast, or in temporary or insecure conditions with friends and with family. So when this task panel was given to me, I did employ some liaison with community law, not as much liaison as I wanted in terms of time permitting, and some of the responses were forthcoming in terms of other local authorities and wider afield actually. But what I did look at was some statistical analysis and data. Those figures are within line tables currently. And it did show some incongruence really in terms of a couple of parameters. And I'm sure the community manager will give some context as well as well. I did look at some comparative local authorities, and I thought it prudent to see what our nearest neighbours doing, South Northamptonshire, but also understanding the number of households per thousands was also an important comparative factor. Ours being 33,000 in Daventry, South Northamptonshire 31. I looked a bit further afield, seeing what happening across the border in Rugby in terms of some of the problems they're facing, and also I looked for a further comparator in another part of the region of the UK, which was near metropolitan areas, 20 miles away, similar to here, similar household, similar demographics, and similar labour market profile, which was apparent to me. And what it found was that in terms of the number of families with children residing in bed and breakfast accommodation for longer than 6 weeks, Rugby 44,000 in terms of number of households, 0. Selby 36,000, 0. South Northamptonshire 0. And Daventry District 2. And those were in the last quarter figures in the last 2016-17. So from that has delivered an incongruent amount of prevention and relief actions also. That was another comparative to look at, really quite revealing actually. And again I looked at those local authorities. So it's just important to state that when we talk about prevention and relief actions, this information pertains to decisions taken by local authorities on homelessness, applications and households are set as over main homelessness duty by the local authority. Again, what we found here, Rugby, in terms of those relief and prevention actions, 121 were carried out 2016-17. So number of cases per household was 2.75. In Selby, it was 265 cases, which is 7.30. And in South Northamptonshire, there was 625 cases, which was 16.99 per 1,000 households. In Daventry, it was 34, which was just 1 per number of cases per household. It's incongruent because I've used comparators in terms of the similar households. And if you look at the trend data, there should be many more prevention-related actions made, in fact. And those actions are about preventing those individuals going, unfortunately, down that route into homelessness and all the problems associated with it. I think in terms of community impact, there's been a significant burden upon some community organisations. And I think it was a very clear and important presentation made within the Churches Forum, where we had that discussion and the community manager gave some facts and figures as well. The coalface on the ground, that interface between people are going from parish to parish or within the town itself, are that these community organisations are, especially if they've been have a intentionally homeless status, are the ones that often are picking up the pieces. They're picking up the pieces financially, with a huge budget and strain upon church resources. They're picking it up socially, where the residents and the interaction sometimes with some quite agitated residents dealing with homelessness. So that directly contributes to some of those recommendations. I'll try to explain that. I would like to comment about the comorbidities as well. We know from data and we know from reports that there is a strong correlation with alcohol and drug dependency. We also know those services aren't available or aren't in supported housing options. They often fall into homelessness with a completely unsuitable accommodation. And I think it's fair to say, as we all know, that those either health or social care provided or community provided interventions and services have been cut exponentially over the last several years in terms of availability. There is also a problem with them, as I think documents might argue, about actually working together and seeing what they can and cannot provide. On the back of that, it's also important to focus upon what's happening in the East Midlands and Daventry in terms of the financial outlook, actually. And we have information as well from the Office of National Statistics, and also being covered by carriers like the BBC, that house prices, in terms of correlated to average earnings and mortgage offers in the East Midlands, we are right up there in terms of lower wages, multiples of, to actually obtain any meaningful mortgage offers for the people that accrue low wages. And those low wages actually are not me making assumptions, they are in the NOMIS data as well for Daventry, unfortunately, in terms of earnings for a household. There was an increase in rental rates correlated with availability or non-availability of housing stock. Private rental arrangements requiring sometimes 2 times the monthly rental amounts, plus a bond, plus also administrative fees, which is out of the reach of most young people, certainly, and older people. And there's been continued use of food banks within the region by those in receipt of welfare provision and those that are accruing low wages also. Where should we move to next? I have received an update, a very helpful update from Maria Taylor regarding sort of operational matters and sort of the impact upon DDC as we go forward, and the HRA is actually administered and we are compliant with it by April 2018. There's going to be a huge burden placed upon resources, housing officers. That's again reflected in the recommendations. That's for you to read as well, it's in as an appendix. But what I will add is that if we are looking for more full-time housing officers and options. I mean, really, some of that, knowing that, as Miriam Taylor has said, that the caseload has increased fivefold, that has to be in some kind of outreach capacity.
Can I just clarify, we're anticipating a fivefold increase from April. Caseload is doubled, not fivefold.
Okay, thank you for
That is
clarifying.
what's in.
That's good, thank you.
Thank you.
There's a lot of facts and figures and
There are,
statistics getting
there are,
around that.
there are.
Yeah.
I'm sure we'll provide some more information regarding that. So that was one of my recommendations as well in terms of outreach housing officer, which I know some outreach goes on already, but having that job description donated to that one individual. I think that's it.
Okay, good. Before we look at some recommendations, let's open it to the floor for questions. And the benefit also this evening is we've got a shared burden, so we've got Maria here as well, and we've got Councillor Olga. Do any of our members or guests want to ask any questions? Particularly Councillor Pritchard, but any of the other people, in obviously respect to the report. Thank you, Councillor Pritchard.
You don't use the word sofa surfing anywhere, but I presume that's a homeless part of it is a homeless issue. One assumes you cannot pick up any data on that, so it's a hidden issue, a hidden problem?
No, that's not the case.
Oh, right.
If somebody they can be homeless and that's, living without any kind of tenure, sofa surfing, if they're in priority need, we have a homeless duty to them, so they're not hidden.
No, what I'm saying is they might not present themselves to you because they feel they're sleeping on their mate's sofa. So there may be a slightly bigger problem out there than we're actually aware of.
Which I think is likely to be addressed potentially with the publicity drive prior to the Homeless Reduction Act coming in next year.
Thank you.
Without doubt, the true instance is unknown. Lots of the charities, crisis shelter, have all put down in black and white that we don't really know the true picture and incidents.
It's potentially like an iceberg. Let's, Councillor.
Yeah, just a quickie, as a trustee of CAD and also the consolidated charity, there is an amount of work that both of them are doing, in this area. However, I think Councillor Pritchard mentioned reasons. One of the reasons for being there was one particular couple that were very familiar with Councillor Pritchard, and the reasons of them being there, and quite honestly, they fell into as far as I'm concerned, the group of people that doesn't matter how hard you tried to help them, they wouldn't be helped. And that is, a difficulty. What are the reasons for them being there in the first place? My brother got married with his darling wife, and they lived in our house because there wasn't a house. I know times change, but we all accept these days that the part of getting married is that you move straight into a dwelling, and that's changed obviously in recent years because it never used to happen. But I'm more concerned about the reason why these people are homeless, because they started off in a home somewhere.
Possibly. And that's the thing, isn't it? Each of these cases will have their own story, exactly. But and for us, that is obviously part of the investigation, no doubt. But I guess we have to put the structure into place. Let's take Councillor Pritchard.
Sorry, that's a really good point. And I've focused upon young people, and I also highlighted that they are the most concerning population currently. However, being deliberately obtuse as the report was, knowing that I have dealings with individuals, it is a spiral. It's this descent, which is very difficult to get out of when you have alcohol dependency and you have mental health problems. But saying that, there needs to be engagement. Councillor Paul totally agree.
And that's why the comorbidities section is so important, of course. Let's go to Councillor.
Yeah, you know, I've only been in post a little while, and I was grateful for some of the information that Maria Taylor sent through, and I'm sure that we will work, you know, very closely now in looking into this issue. There are a couple of things that are really important to me. Is first of all, you know, I do think that we need that outreach element, my opinion, and we need to talk through some of those with regard to seeking out proactively some of these people. I'm also, I believe passionately that the voluntary and the statutory sector needs to be involved as well. This has got to be teamwork. This has got to be all linked up, and there may well be processes out there already and people doing similar work to ensure that when the new regime comes in, which is going to be incredibly demanding as a council, that we have that support and our partnerships in place, or to develop the partnerships, so that we have a more holistic approach to try and resolve some of these issues. And also I think we need to be honest with ourselves that you know, I went out with Futures to some of their case studies on individuals who are going to be evicted, and you know, some of the issues was almost like that there are individuals that actually cause their own problems, and that's a small element, and that's sad because it's actually unnecessary, and it's deflecting resources that should be on the vulnerable, those affected by alcohol, drugs and mental health issues because of the feckless. And so I think there are many challenges ahead, and you know, I'm just about getting my head into this. But certainly from my point of view, is that we need to be compassionate, we need to be organised, we need to be structured, we need to ensure that we're getting those, that nobody's falling through the gaps. And I think these are massive challenges. But I also think we've got a fantastic team here, and I think we can hopefully come up with a model and develop a model over time which actually seeks out the most vulnerable, ensuring that people have that common decency of shelter and warmth and security that we enjoy as individuals. So I know there's a bit more strategic and more sort of a visionary thing, but obviously a lot of detail we put on the board as we go through this premise. And I was very grateful for the briefing that gives us, beginning to give us an outline on what this thing might look like.
It's got a complex area. Thanks, Councillor Ritchie, I'm going to take your question stroke comment, then I'd like to move into the wrapping up the recommendation stage and see how we're going to treat these and the line of sight between that and the objectives.
Thank you.
Councillor Ritchie.
My comment is really just a concern that we don't, in this discussion, get around to regarding some people as having brought homelessness upon themselves. You know, even if people are homeless because they have got problems with alcohol or drugs or the law or something else, you know, there are probably other factors behind it, and I think that we have got to start. Councillor mentioned the word compassion, which I think is what actually, you know, ought to drive us. I would be anxious that we don't, you know, perhaps it's quite difficult to get a full picture of the people who don't wish to present themselves as homeless, because they have got problems of alcoholism, or if they're concerned about implicating others, that they are, you know, in whose homes they are surface surfing, they're anxious about getting anybody else into difficulties. I have come across in Daventry almost small communities of people, young people, most of them, you know, with some sort of, certainly with social problems, but in many cases, you know, problems, mental health problems of depression, of greater and lesser degrees of severity, getting very, very little help from society. They are concerned. They almost have developed a certain self-sufficiency, but they are concerned about officialdom, and they are therefore very, very difficult to contact and bring forwards. And I just hope that what we do, the last thing that is going to help them is an approach that is, you know, that is bureaucratic. the other group that I have has been reported to me in Daventry is people who are homeless but are mainly from Eastern Europe. There was one case a couple of years ago of, I think it was in the Medway in the Grange, of a family, not a family, a household being discovered with a very large number of people. Well, I've heard reports from those sort of communities that was only the tip of an iceberg. There are places that are not even homes that have been used in Daventry with large numbers of people, sleeping there at night. Now, it may be that some of them have got anxieties about their status in Britain, and therefore, they're not going to want to approach official. But nevertheless, they're a problem. But it is, of course, a very difficult problem to, how to engage with them without making their situations worse, or without legitimising something that, that shouldn't be there.
Thank you, Councillor Chair. I think there are other issues connected to that as well, such as we've seen, modern slavery and all these kind of topics as well, where people are staying and something. There's been a lot of cases around that, of course. Thank you. Councillor O'Gore responding.
Yeah,
I'd like to
I think there are people that will not self-refer, but I think we must also respect people's privacy, their right to private lives, and that we must be careful that we're not intrusive, all right, and allowing people their free agency to decide on how they want to live their lives. Whether that is sofa surfing or not, that is their right, and we need to respect that. And there will be hard to reach. I think this is a really, really complex and complicated, but I think if we're driven by the right values, with regard to what we're trying to do, we're trying to seek out the vulnerable, all right, to ensure that people, as I said, have a safe place where they feel secure and where they're not going to be out exposed to the elements. And I'm very confident on a visionary point of view, but I think we'll get there with everybody's support and willing of the statutory and voluntary agencies working together. But we also need to be very careful that we're not going to be a nanny state to individuals. I passionately believe in people's right to a private life, to live their life the way they wish, and we need to respect that. On the other hand, we also need to be accessible to those that need us.
I don't think anybody wants to see a whole, just flippantly, a whole load of homeless people in the day. So it's very important that point about the values, isn't it? So respecting their rights to privacy, but actually having the infrastructure where we can support them should they, in a nutshell.
And then these things may be motivated by mental illness. Like I remember a case of they were interviewed him on television. It was a documentary on homeless, and the geezer being interviewed actually said, "I actually like this life," and it's. Who are we? Who are we to judge? But on the other hand, we also need to be sensitive of those that may feel that they can't, and we need to empower them so that they can see.
Thank you, Councillor. Let me take a comment from the Community Manager, Maria, and then we'll basically, we're going to see if we can look at these recommendations.
Just a couple of points of clarity. Presumably the members have seen my comments on the...
yes, to a point, but I'm happy for you to actually address some of those, actually the substantive ones.
I've just made a few notes about key points to clarify.
Chairman, may I be very rude and excuse myself before Maria starts?
Yes, please, Councillor Paul, thank you.
I think it's accurate to say Daventry District Council, like other housing authorities, our feeling is that most homeless cases are actually either facing homelessness or they're going to be imminently going to be homeless, and we resolve most cases at that stage. So there might be pending eviction, fleeing domestic violence or about to flee domestic violence, coming out of hospital following mental breakdowns or what have you. People coming out of prison, remember that can be homelessness. Prevention and relief is a key part of the job of housing options. It may not be captured in our stats, but for most cases that is something we are doing. So that is key part. That is why a lot of people are not homeless, because we've prevented their homelessness. That is standard. Now I'm not sure what.
That's an important point, actually.
Yeah, I'm not sure how everybody. I can only guess that the statistics are unreliable, because I'm suspecting, given some of the very high numbers being quoted, that probably other councils are counting more prevention activities like than we do. So, for example, maybe they're counting whenever they award discretionary housing payments, because that would technically prevent somebody facing homelessness. If they're counting them and we're not, that's going to hugely skew statistics. But the prevention and relief that we are providing includes paying off rent arrears, doing rent recovery, so giving them rent up front, providing rent deposits. We've done mortgage rescue. We often end up housing people through the housing waiting list before we've even finished dealing with the homeless application. So they end up, the case is closed and they never become homeless because we have managed to rehouse them through the housing waiting list. And other times it might well be resolving family disputes. Rough sleepers is usually what people focus on, but that continues to be a very tiny proportion of our caseload and everybody's caseload. It's not true. It's true for that particular cohort that mental health issues, substance abuse are often comorbidity factors, but that is not the case for most homeless cases that we deal with now under the current legislation. It's going to be because somebody's lost their job, they took on a rent that they couldn't afford, they've had a family breakdown, somebody's died in the family and they can no longer afford that. That is typically, and it can happen to anybody from any background. It is not just the poorest or non-working. Homelessness can affect and does affect a whole very broad range of the population.
Sorry, Mary, can you just that bit about rough sleeping? I don't do foot patrol around here. Have you got any numbers on how many people?
For years and years, we literally had zero rough sleeping.
Yeah.
We're down to single figures.
Wow.
We've got a couple of persistent cases. Thankfully, one of them was resolved by effective multi-agency working, creative effective multi-agency working. I'll say no more than that. But eventually, very sad case ended up being resolved when she entered into the prison system on remand, because which different mental health professionals were involved and decided, and that has been a successful outcome. The case that Councillor Pritchard is all too familiar with is very much a long-running case, and it's been the worst that many of us have seen over many years. But my sister was only telling me yesterday about an old lady who was clearly homeless, sitting in the street late last night when she was going home from work, who has chosen a lifestyle to be some sort of wandering through vagrants. They are very small numbers. You perhaps see one or two of them in a year.
I think that's the point, isn't it? So it takes on your point about personal freedom to choose, but there are externalities of homelessness. And Councillor Frenchman, your point actually earlier about even if you say only to those personal those people's own experiences is never
and it links in with regards to capacity to make that life choice, and that's a really difficult one, without getting a mental health team in to judge capacity to make that choice and whether they truly are vulnerable. It's a real tough area.
And actually, what I didn't realise until I was involved in the multi-agency case conference recently, capacity is not, it can come and go. Today you might have capacity to make the decision that you want to leave a mental health facility and go and live somewhere entirely inappropriate. Tomorrow the community psychiatric nurse might decide you haven't got any capacity, and although you made that choice yesterday, you're not capable of looking after yourself. I mean, that is literally how it can come and go.
Before you carry on, Maria, Councillor.
Yes, so you were mentioning some of the policies and things that you do to help people, like pay off rent and stuff. So I presume there's a budget, is there? I should know that. How big a budget is it?
A lot of them are loans, but we have got a budget that we've used in the past. I can't recall it off the top of my head, but it's in the housing options team budget. We operate.
And do the loans get repaid?
They do. Sometimes they can take 2 or 3 years or whatever, but we prevent homelessness, and they're often used to help people they go straight into private rental accommodation.
Thank you. Councillor Pritchard, a quick comment.
A couple of comments actually. We are where we are with data at the moment, but it's standardised. It should be through every local authority. There are different ways to count things, I understand, but saying it should have been captured, it should be captured. We should have more incidents. We should have greater numbers. I'll give you the Derbyshire Dales example. 2016 to 17, considering it's a similar actual households to us, they had 10 cases This year, there were 818. So that's where we are.
As I said, perhaps they're counting things that we haven't even dreamed of counting.
But there are
they're big numbers.
But they're standardised, aren't they? You're only allowed to count certain things and not allowed to count others.
Okay, that's an interesting point for debate, but thank you.
All I can do is assure the committee
Yeah.
that we are doing homeless prevention activities. If we weren't doing that, we would have a greater number of homeless. And your proportion of how many applications you get and how many you then end up with a duty under the current legislation, we are, smack bang, average, standard, what you would expect from a local authority for the number of acceptances as a percentage.
Yes, Chair, can I just comment? I think it's important, and that's a really, really good point you raise. There are eyes lies and down lies, and there are statistics. At the end of the day, the proof is in the pudding. It's how effective and efficient are we with regard to, and then you've got to look at the extreme end of actually, are people actually in positions that they shouldn't be in that we could have prevented? And all those figures are positive for this district. You may have a point with regard to what is or what's not recorded, but to be honest, that's a bit of a red herring. The reality is that do we have processes, practices and working and protocols that actually prevent and keep people safe, keep people sheltered? And my argument will be is that statistics say that we do.
Okay, Councillor Ritchie, do you mind if I come
back?
I
wanted to respond to Councillor Harder. We've got to, unless we have the statistics, how do we know that what we are doing is working?
Okay, okay, thank you.
With 100 cases a year, and we literally provide the data that we need to give to government we do it on a spreadsheet. We focus our time and energy and resources on managing the cases. The only way to understand the cases is to come in and have a look at the cases, take a random sample, and we'll talk to you through the different scenarios. And that's why we offered that at the beginning of this process, because 100 cases is pretty much been our average until this year. We've actually had more homeless cases this year, but partially because we've had a temp in for 6 months doing the frontline triage, and she's created more cases than other people. A lot of them have been closed down a lot sooner, but nevertheless, that is part of the reason for the caseload. She's been imposed for 6 months of this year, and we've seen, some of the increase in demand has been just due to a different officer's approach.
Let's have you finish these up, Maureen.
There's literally a couple.
I want to aim to wrap this up in about 10-15 minutes maximum, including taking on board which recommendations are going to make any further difference. Okay, thank you.
I think it's important to point out that intentionality, which was touched on before, is a key element of the current legislation. So actually, you go through this test. Is somebody actually homeless? If they're homeless, have they done anything or not done something that's created their homelessness? And do they have a priority need? That has been part of housing legislation for 4 decades, I think. That sounds about right, doesn't it?
1970s.
Yeah.
Oh, what was that?
1977.
So 4 decades
of
of very similar approach, and that's being turned on its head. But right now, looking at right now, that's who we have a duty to. The new legislation that's coming in, which is alluded to in Councillor Pritchard's report, incorporates a wide range of people who we've dealt with in many other ways, but actually right now we don't have a duty to them. So we're going to have a bigger cohort, but another key factor of the new legislation, and I should point out at this point that the Code of Guidance for the Homeless Reduction Act is actually a draft for consultation, so we won't know what that is probably till early next year, because we've got until early December to respond to that. A very technical document, but actually another really key aspect of it, which is really important, and most housing professionals welcome this, is a lot of the onus, it's not just the council's got a duty, but the applicant will have a responsibility. So one of the first things you do is engage with that applicant and devise a plan. What are you going to do about resolving your homelessness, and what are we going to do to help you resolve it? And that is quite significant because it does reflect the reality on the ground. That where it comes to these very difficult cases, if they're not going to take part in a course of treatment to resolve some of their underlying health issues or substance abuse issues or whatever, it's going to stop. It's going to stop there. So that's that's pretty much what I was going to cover, really.
Thank you, Mary. I appreciate that. And I appreciate this is a bit of a moving target, actually. It has taken some while, particularly the new legislation, etc. Councillor Bridger, I'm going to hand it back to you for a moment. So we've got a set of recommendations here. We've had some extra inputs here as well. Given, let's take a step back. Given the objective was, are we doing enough to prevent support homelessness in Daventry? What I'm hearing is we're doing a lot. Can DDC do more to support the case of homelessness in the district? That's really for me where the recommendations come in. Basically, if there's more we can be doing, do these recommendations improve that situation?
I forgot one point, and that is that everybody who works in housing options, and in care and repair for that matter, works remotely. Outreach work is already a key feature of everybody's job. So,
which is number 7 actually.
that is, they literally will go out in the evening, early in the morning to go and find somebody. We've had a report of somebody who's sleeping. That happens. We do go out and seek cases whenever and wherever appropriate.
Thank you. Thank you, Maria. Okay.
I understand that, but the key being, if I've had a report, that they are unfound until that point. That's why outreach must be part of a job description for one individual. If you can have 3 more whole-time equivalents, or it's to be discussed, the recommendation suggests. We're shaking.
So can we go into the, so let's actually, what I'd like to do actually, sorry it's a bit of a convoluted process, but from the recommendations actually and the extra information subsequently to the report actually, are there any areas you think we given the fact you spent a year on this, any things that we really should focus on here, so maybe there are about 4 or 5 recommendations, and then focus on those and get those pushed forward?
Could I ask for some assistance here? Because from the recommendations, in some cases I'm not entirely clear what it is we're being asked to recommend.
Exactly, that's why I'm asking Councillor Pritchard to reflect.
I think the sentences need
I did say that. Some of these were emerging recommendations historically for 6 months ago that hands up, copy paste without some verbal instruction, which I will provide now.
So really in that respect we've got 2 options. We take them all, we don't take any, we basically just take a few and say let's just basically move the story on, because we have been here a year actually, that's the reality of the situation.
Well, I guess, Mr. Chairman, to what extent can these stand alone, or is it the case that they have to stand together?
No, they don't stand together, no, we can take 1 or 2 and adopt the rest.
From a homelessness perspective.
Yeah, we've done it before. The point is which ones will make the greatest impact to improving the situation, which is our objective.
So, recommendation 1 should say, through version control, establish community funding provision.
Is it really simple as put a new word in, establish community funding provision?
Yeah, because I can't have, I can't steer how that looks like in my operations. All I can suggest, and I don't know what budgets.
But that's okay, you don't need to, because when we do these historically, we always say basically we always set a recommendations in here, they get considered through the process, and then ultimately ends up at full council. So given your research that you've done and the fact you've worked with this, is it simply a case of you're saying establish community funding provision, that's it?
For those that are first contact, in terms of community organisations, the ones that feel the brunt of.
So can you just reword that please? Sorry. Establish community funding provision for what? Be very clear.
For organisations and groups that are in the community that interact with homelessness cases.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, we're talking about council funding community organisations, are we?
That's what you mean, Councillor?
Yes. I'm not disagreeing with what you're saying. I'm just trying to understand the wording of what it is we've been asked to decide on.
Okay. So can you tell that from the top again, so Philip, please? And then we'll agree on it.
Establish community funding provision, grants and loans from voluntary groups with receipted expenditure to help enable associations and groups support homelessness cases, something like that.
Okay, we need to be very clear. So I think, can you read it back to us, Philip?
At the moment I've got established community funding provision, grants, loan for voluntary groups.
To ensure that they can support homelessness cases within their localities.
Okay, that'll be the recommendation.
Could I suggest a slight adjustment? Yes. How about establish budgetary provision for providing grants and loans for voluntary groups? That way it's, I think, clearer.
Okay, happy with that?
I think that's clearer.
Do that again, please, Phil? Yeah, we'll take out. We'll take a little bit of
Establish a
curiosity.
budgetary provision for grants and loans for voluntary groups in exchange for suitable controls such as receipts. Which I think is what you're saying.
Yeah. We'll put context to that. These community organisations are paying for rent, they're paying for double rent, they're paying for, enabling car, MOTs, helping people go to hospital in Coventry, Northampton. It's all through them. There may be some help as well from the council, I don't know.
Okay. So have you got that, Philippa?
So establish budget provision for grants and loans.
Voluntary groups
Voluntary groups.
subject to receipted expenditure.
I say receipted or approved expenditure.
Okay, fine. Let's keep it pretty tight around that now. Good. And for the avoidance of any confusion, everybody knows this goes off to through the managers, and then it comes to strategy, etc. So it may be modified, and we've all been there. Okay, so that's fine. But the modification, not in the spirit, but turning.
Chairman, I think just to sort of clarify the process, whatever leaves here this evening will then go on to be considered by management and strategy group to make recommendations back to council. So it doesn't mean that anything that comes from here necessarily will be accepted.
Exactly.
What management and strategy group will be looking for is evidence to support the recommendations. So if the evidence is there, they stand more chance of
absolutely. That makes sense. So it's the same, and we've got a flow diagram for this as well, etc. But occasionally we do a little bit of crafting their recommendations on the evening. It's not always my best preference, but there's a lot of information in this area. Okay with that one? If you can read about Philippa, then we'll just
establish
basically...
budget provisions for grants and loans for voluntary groups subject to receipted/approved expenditure.
Agreed?
Yeah.
Agreed on that? There's obviously 4 of us on this one. 1, 2, 3, 4. Agreed, everybody?
Yeah.
Yeah, great. Councillor Pritchard, agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you. Right, that's number 1. Number 1, modified. Number 2, Councillor Pritchard.
To undertake a feasibility study for a multiple residency on persons accommodation with on-site voluntary and statutory agency liaison or agency.
Thank you. So
input.
we always want to get as close to we can as smart objectives, so to undertake ties it up. Happy with that?
Yeah.
Yep, 4 of us, good. So just basically to undertake additional words and everything like that. Happy with that, Philippa?
Yeah.
Yep, it's a very small insertion.
Yeah.
Councillor Pritchard.
Number 3, to ensure there's a requirement for DDC to provide effective signposting to community representative bodies and hostel accommodation.
So you've got simply to ensure a requirement.
Yeah. There is a requirement.
To ensure there is a requirement. Yeah. Happy with that for the others?
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. So that's 3 of them. 4th one.
Number 4. Trying to put this into a smart objective recommendation. To ensure that there is officer and member collation of new and existing homelessness episodes.
Would it be possible to explain what that is? Because I'm not sure that I understand
Yes, please,
that.
Councillor Pritchard, what's your intention there?
Intention is that when we have migrating homelessness cases, intentionally or not intentionally, from ward to ward, then we lose track. We lose that representation as a elected member to try and advocate for them. When then they move into Weedon, then all of a sudden they are unknown to ward members. So when their location is known, I think that should be, people should be made aware in terms of elected members.
So visibility and tracking the members, because it can get quite confusing if you're having 2 sets of collation. Is it really it's about communication, is it, or and are there risks around that because of confidentiality?
Are you talking just about rough sleeping, street homelessness?
Yeah.
Then I think that needs to be specific.
Okay.
And if it is a rough sleeper who has contacted a ward member, then officers would be in a position potentially to pass that on, but not if they haven't, because our housing protocol in the Constitution is very clear about we don't automatically notify members of issues, housing or homelessness issues in their ward, but if a person decides to make an inquiry through their councillor, that is when they become involved. So we wouldn't be in a position to share data with members unless it's come that the onus to do so has come from the applicant.
You couldn't share numbers of within our ward area, because you've got to realise that most of these people are disenfranchised and they don't even know who the councillor are. Especially if they don't, do you know what I'm trying to say? How can we be representative of these individuals if we don't know that potentially they exist or that they know that we exist?
Yes, there's two things here. So what are we looking to achieve with the recommendation? And is there already a system in place, or is there a better way? Is there a better way of crafting it?
Well, yeah, well, it could be that we've got a geographical representation on a map that is sent out, I don't know, periodically, and we know how many numbers there are in each.
Is there a fundamental problem there? Because the people themselves may move about anyway, and they're
It's a shame, Deanna, Councillor Edden, is it? Because actually, I've got experience of elected members notifying housing options of street homeless people in their ward, passing through, or sort of more established cases. But the only case I can think of where a homeless party has gone to their ward member is the one you know about, and that's in 10 years' experience. So I don't think it's much of an issue on the basis that we normally get notified by members if they're aware of an issue in their ward, but it's not usually the party themselves that are asking for members to be involved.
So what are we seeking to achieve basically with this recommendation? It's about knowing that
notification.
But what's the point of the notification?
So they can advocate for and access community funding, receipts, you know.
Who's notifying who? Is it the ward member notifies the council, or the council notify the ward member?
The council officers notifying the ward member.
But do the council officers not already do that? I mean, what would they? I mean, you might obviously. So FYI.
Well, the case in my ward wasn't notified to me. I came across it through community groups. I wasn't told by the council.
Right.
It was a phone call at home, and then it was a visit.
Through you, Chairman, we remember the protocol for dealing with housing matters, and would restrict when we can't and don't routinely notify members of any somebody's private business. If they want to engage their councillor, they're entitled to do so. And I'd also be quite concerned about data protection.
Yeah.
Because
is the data protection so that if you knew about a case, say on Councillor Pritchard's ward, you couldn't tell him about it, but he may not know about it?
If you said to me, "Oh, I've noticed this is happening, this housing case, this homeless case," I could notify the portfolio holder or the ward member. That's in the protocol of the Constitution.
Okay,
but otherwise, members' inquiries come from, a constituent talks to a member and they make an inquiry. That's the process.
So you know, but he doesn't. Can you tell him or not? Sorry, let's be clear.
Only if he asks, or if the.
But he won't know to ask if he doesn't know.
Well, that's people's rights, because the vast majority of housing and homeless cases do not ask their members to make inquiries on their behalf.
Right.
That's a very tiny fraction.
Would it? I suppose the question is, would it be helpful for the ward member to know? What could the ward member do with that knowledge?
I can't think of what they would do, and I would be concerned about breaching confidentiality and.
So it rests on the confidentiality, and that's the point. So where does that leave this point? Because the big picture is collation, but actually the real issue is not the collation. The real issue is the ward member. It would be helpful for the ward member to know, but the reality of the situation is the ward member shouldn't necessarily know, wouldn't it? At least not through the council. You'd have to know by some other means. And that is that a strict legal requirement? Is that way, or is that basically just how protocols been done?
Well, we have a protocol, but I think you probably know a bit more about the general data protection regs and the new ones coming in.
Yeah, well, it's not clear to me exactly what's been asked for and why it's been asked. I'm sort of leaving to the technical people here. But I think if there is an issue of data protection, then we can address that in the response back through the strategy group. So I think really you need to think about, as S&I committee, what is it you want? You're hearing concerns being raised by management, but it is your set of recommendations to take forward.
I
If it's
think-
not doable, then you'll be told it's not doable.
Okay, exactly. So Councillor Pritchard, one last go at it. Do we need to keep that in light of what we've heard?
Yes.
Okay, so then give us a clear way of writing that down, so the recommendation is it.
Okay, episodes of rough sleeping of individuals should be conveyed to the ward member concerned.
Okay. The ward members, potentially in brackets,
Members, yes.
that cover the ward.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so that's the challenge, Maria and the
I
team.
will say that data protection actually is negated by the fact if someone's vulnerable. And I've got to be careful here, but in terms of vulnerable adults, including child protection and others, that is negated if we think that individual's at risk.
Okay, so that's something to play. So that's clear. We understand the objective. It's basically, like you say, you can happen, etc. Or not, but that's the question. Okay, Philippa?
I've got episodes of rough sleeping should be conveyed to the ward member.
Brackets S,
Yeah.
because there are more
Yeah.
than one of them. Happy with that? 4 on the committee? Very good, thank you. Next one. So we've got 4 so far, we're nearly there, honestly. Number 5, Councillor Pritchard.
I think 5 can be withdrawn.
Withdrawn, thank you. So we'll skip number 5, move on to number 6.
It says any safeguarding of vulnerable adults are recorded by the DVC and are forwarded directly to the safeguarding hub. I'm not sure if that happens already, perhaps.
It does happen.
If it does happen, it doesn't need to be in there.
Good, so you're saying, Maria, it happens
Well,
already?
the last bit of the sentence doesn't happen. We do not communicate to all member for the reasons given. Because we could have all sorts of very sensitive data about offending, illnesses, all sorts of stuff that is very confidential, and we wouldn't be at liberty to share that with the ward member, but I can guarantee you that safeguarding alerts are dealt with appropriately and all other multi-agency requirements.
Thank you, Maria. Councillor Pritchard, would you like to withdraw that under circumstances?
I think it could be withdrawn if the member's aware of, but they're within their ward anyway, because there could be a discussion, direct discussion, so you find out.
To clarify, if a member makes an inquiry, because, you know, if you were to phone me and say, it's this homeless case, or, well, ideally, they've knocked on my door and said, can you help me, then I can share information with you. But unless that's happened, I'm not in a position to share that information.
Okay, good, thank you, great. See, I know this is a bit painful, but actually sometimes this is a useful forum so we can have some clarity. And number 7, this is the remote workers that we've discussed a couple of times actually already. Councillor Pritchard.
To introduce a designated outreach homelessness housing officer within the district with the remit to find homeless people and support to get off the streets and back into a settled life.
You want to stop there?
Yeah.
Thank you. Philippa, you got that?
Yeah.
Well done, thank you. Agreed? Thank you. Number 8.
This may be redundant, of course, because this council will be compliant with the Act, but it does say, in line with the Homelessness Reduction Act, the initial, regular and continued assessment of homelessness applications, regardless of deemed intentional, to take place with 2 written copies of outcomes forwarded to the applicant.
Through you, Chairman, I think we don't even know what the requirement, we've got a feel for what the requirements will be, but there will be statutory requirements. So I respectfully suggest that this is probably not needed in here. The Code of Guidance is out for consultation.
You said that's a consultation.
Yeah. So ultimately, what we will do, whatever is required statutorily.
I understand that, and I agree, and I think I'd like to say now and take another task panel how we are compliant with the HRA next year.
In due course, yeah, once post-implementation.
Post-implementation,
Okay, that's fine, so
okay.
we'll withdraw that one. Since you started this, a lot's happened actually.
Yeah, that's an awful lot.
Yeah, exactly. I know this looks painstaking, particularly for John, but it has been quite a tricky piece of work. And we only meet once every 5 weeks, so we can afford just a little luxury to discuss it. Finally then, number 9, that this council, Councillor Pritchard.
to ensure that this council, that this council ensures that no families remain within temporary B&B accommodation for longer than 6 weeks.
You see my comments on that. That's unlikely to be practical, given that we're not always able to discharge homeless duties. So a worthy aspiration, I can't disagree, but unlikely to be deliverable.
Okay, let's come back to that in a second in terms of the timescales. Councillor McCoy.
I was really just going to make an observation very similar to what Maria's just said. And whilst it's very laudable, what exactly would happen if we were to comply with this? If we've got a family in temporary or B&B accommodation, they get to the 6 weeks, they haven't been found anywhere else, what's the council supposed to do at that point, based on this recommendation?
I think the inference is that they don't get to that point, actually.
But could I suggest, with respect, then the recommendation should be dealing with the processes to ensure that they don't get to it, rather than simply saying, ensure that they don't.
It's anticipated that the Homeless Reduction Act will result in fewer people in once it's implemented. We'll be dealing with more cases earlier on, and therefore fewer people will be in temporary accommodation. We have a lot of people in temporary accommodation now, either because we're going through their homeless application, and that's the most suitable place to put them if they've got nowhere to stay, or because we've gone through their homeless application, we've got a duty, and we're unable to discharge it because of some key factor. So if they've got rent arrears, the case that has been all over the newspaper today of all days, forget how it's been reported. I can promise you, it is not as reported. But basically, if somebody has got significant rent arrears, there is not a housing association, even if we've got a duty, who is willing to take them on. So we will have to help that individual find another way through and find them alternative accommodation.
So is there an element of, it's a bit arbitrary, this number actually doesn't take any care of the process? Is that part of the problem?
It depends what kind of importance you put on statistics. That question came back to the beginning, because you look at the live tables, although I only use 2 or 3 comparators, huge authorities, Bedford, they have 0. Most of them have 0. That's not me just plucking it out. You look at the data. So why have we got 2?
I mean, a possible reason may be because they use their own stock and they give people short-term tenancies because they're a stock holding property, and they have that. They're able to do that. We don't have our own stock. We're not able to do that.
No, I understand that, but it's not actually those families' fault that we don't have stock, is it?
They might not count in the statistics, but if they're in a licence for a month at a time, it amounts to the same thing.
Okay.
They're just not in the statistics.
Thank you. Maria, John's got a comment.
Yes, Chairman, I'm very interested in this whole process. I'm very conscious of the fact that I haven't been involved in it before, but I'm also slightly concerned that the committee might set itself unachievable recommendations or targets. And I think, obviously, I'll be able to be part of the management response in terms of the final set of recommendations. But on this one, perhaps taking a wider view would be instructive. So when we had the Grenfell fire, the Prime Minister came out and said everybody will be rehoused in permanent accommodation by next Wednesday or something like that.
And that still hasn't happened, of course.
There were 202 families, I understand, and I understand that currently 26 have been permanently rehoused. Now, I don't think that is because of any lack of willingness from that council, who are under serious pressure of being wound up and commissionered and all sorts of things. It's because it's a practical impossibility to meet those needs. And I think that's the danger with a recommendation like this. Not that it isn't correct and altruistically correct, and we would all agree with it. It is not achievable, even in that most stressful of situations where millions of pounds are being thrown at the problem. Even if they built houses for those people, it's only been 6 months. They couldn't have got 200 up probably in that time. So I do think there is a slight issue with the, can I say, extreme nature of this particular recommendation. And I just offer that as a uninformed external point for people just to think about.
Thank you, John. Councillor Pritchard, any final response? We've got to do something. We either basically look at it, or we just say, put it aside for now, come back to it as an aspiration, or basically there are some practical considerations you've heard around the table as well. Perhaps we need to probably remove it or think about it in a different way to what's the objective we're looking to achieve. Or would you like to we've got, I think we've got 6 recommendations. Councillor Frenchman.
Could you get round it by saying something along the lines of that this council strives to ensure that no families remain within blah 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 blah?
So you don't make it a requirement, you make it a...
Yeah, I mean a target or target.
And that way, basically then you don't have the implications of, like you say, what happens, what would you happen? Well, we've got to admit this target, so we keep them out of here, etc.
I mean, it's hugely distressing for the family and massively expensive. Believe me, nobody is in temporary accommodation in a bed and breakfast any longer than is absolutely necessary. And we are in the process of trying to get more temporary accommodation, ideally 2-bedroom properties in Daventry, so that, I mean, it's not permanent secure tenure, but it is way better than being in a bed and breakfast. So that's what we're trying to do.
Thank you, Mary.
Sorry, I mean, I think you said, and I don't know whether I've just remembered what you said or I thought of this myself, that money that we were talking about from the Coach and Horses development, could that be used to help these people?
No. From what I've learned this week, the SIL 123 list is for infrastructure and couldn't be used for affordable housing or anything that looks like it. But that's not to say the council couldn't set aside budget to invest in affordable housing or more temporary accommodation or whatever.
To solve this particular issue if it arose.
Thank you. I'm going to wrap this up if I can. Quickly, Councillor McBride.
Okay, that's fine. I just wanted to say I agree entirely with what Councillor Frenchman's just suggested.
Oh, perfect. Oh, that's good. Right. Councillor Pritchard, can we put in here that this council strives to ensure?
That'd be wonderful.
Thank you very much.
Can I just say that the new legislation is talking about 56 days for each stage. So I just wonder where 6 weeks comes from, because that's 8 weeks.
Is it arbitrary or is it based on some other method of analysis?
Those are like tables, couple of tables.
So from the refer to the data, okay. Let's go with that one. I mean, it will go through, even in the process, we'll have activity, but it basically sets a set of principles. Okay. So, Philippa, all you need to change it, that this council strives to ensure. Right. And can we just take that? That's 6 recommendations, for the sake of making sure we've got every recommendation.
Yes. Can I just clarify, is that families or are you talking about homeless applicants? Is that anyone, even if they're an individual, single person?
Good point.
That's families with children, the right table, isn't it? Statistic.
So if it's specifically families with children, do you want to make it say that in your recommendation?
I think we should state it. If that's our intention, that's what we should say. So families with children. Thank you. Good. There's a lot of hard work there. Thank you, Maria. I really appreciate your feedback, and John, extra comments there as well. Totally keeping us on the straight and narrow as always. Councillor Pritchard, thank you. So we're going to revisit that again, no doubt. And I trust that when they come through, some of that's retained with extra sense that you've seen from the report, and it will make even more of an impact on the difference. Good, thank you. Moving on, I feel that's probably the most challenging part of the agenda for this evening. We should, it doesn't take us so long now to get to the rest of it. But we only meet 5 times a year. We have got, unless Councillor Frenchman makes recommendations.
The chequered flag is now in sight, Chair.
It is? Yeah, well, don't worry, I don't like keeping you. I am in London tomorrow at 8:20. So,
I was just thinking I haven't booked my sleeping bag in.
Right, let's move on then. So, thank you. That's assignment 21. 6 recommendations. Thank you, Councillor Pritchard. Let's go now to, very quickly, Councillor Frenchman. You've got the pleasure of giving a quick verbal report on yours, which is about scrutiny.
Very brief. I've spoken to all interested parties, including Tony and Chris Miller and the Chair of Scrutiny. I will be writing a report in the next couple of weeks, and it should be with us for the February meeting.
So, final report from Councillor Frenchman at the February 2018 meeting. I should think that'd be very controversial, that one.
Yeah.
So that should give us a go. Yeah, Tony, sorry.
I think, Councillor Frenchman did indeed on his panel had a discussion with me fairly early on in the process, which I understood to be around providing you with some background information and context. I would quite welcome an opportunity to speak to you with some thoughts about it.
Oh, right, okay. Yeah. Drop me an email and we'll put a date in the diary.
Great, thank you, Tony.
So
hopefully it's not about evicting the chair.
Well,
the long meetings. Thank you very much. Let's move on to the next item. Looking forward to that one. Assignment 25, review of DDC's management of property holdings. This is a scoping document from Councillor Micklewright to get him active. So, Councillor Micklewright, can you talk to us about your scoping document?
Well, in the interest of brevity, Mr. Chairman, I'm just going to canter through this quickly because it pretty well says on the tin what it is. The council has got an awful lot of property. According to our balance sheet as of last March, we've got £32 million worth of investment property. We've got £31 million of property, plant and equipment, which is predominantly operational property. We've also got several £1 million worth of residential property, which is in the Daventry Estate Company Limited, which we don't directly own, but we can influence. So we have got an extremely substantial amount of property. I don't say that in any way as a criticism. And really the thought process behind this was to come up with something that looked at whether ensuring that we were getting the best value and best usage out of that very, very valuable asset that we have under our control. I think what I should emphasise is what this proposed study is not. It is not about commercial property occupancy levels, because I recognise that that's elsewhere on the agenda. It's been done. Councillor Poole's already also pointed that out, as you know, Chairman. So it's about establishing to what extent the district is performing effectively and fairly in managing that. Where we operate property where we have property for operational purposes, do we know that we're getting the best usage of it, best value out of it? Where we own properties for investment purposes, are they genuinely that? Are we actually setting out to produce a return from them? How do we actually manage that? How do we look at alternatives? If we had different properties, would they produce more? Or would the risk levels be different? Or if we had the money sitting in the bank, would it produce more? Probably not, but it's a question that we should be at least asking. And also looking at issues around statutory compliance on these properties. I remember doing a similar study at another council not so long ago. I won't identify it in case there are any ex-chief executives in the room. And looked at, across that council's property estate, about 30 different statutory requirements, some of which were really critically important, things like asbestos, legionella, life and death stuff. At the other end of the spectrum, there was stuff that wasn't health and safety issue, life-threatening, but nevertheless was statutory. It was things like you're required to have an energy efficiency certificate on display somewhere. And out of 30 different items, this one particular council was non-compliant in, I think, 25 of them, which clearly got some alarm bells going, and they are now 100% compliant. Where are we in that scale? I don't know. I think it would be useful for us to have a look at. But I also want to propose to look at issues around the town versus the rural split. What have we got? Where is it in terms of the split between urban and rural? In terms of distribution, usage, and where resources are deployed. The finances of local government are under stretch and under strain as never before. We have got a very valuable asset and we need to be using it to maximum effect. That is what's behind this particular thing. It's about exploring what we do, comparing it with best practice and considering any alternatives. I don't put this forward out of any belief that Daventry is doing it wrong. I mean, they will come back in due course and say, actually, it's pretty well fantastic. There are no recommendations and that's it. But I don't know.
And the interesting point is, a lot of focus on this might be on improvements, if there are any to be made. But basically having a good look around and saying, actually, we've got a portfolio, could you make even more use of the portfolio? Is it right, etc.
And if it can bring in more money, that's more resources to put on services for the community. So.
And I think we often talk about this 98% occupancy 70 rate or thereabouts, but it could be 98% at a even higher income perhaps, etc. Does any of the members have any comments on this one?
I was a little confused by what you were trying to achieve, but now you've clarified it. I think it's very worthwhile.
Very good, thank you. Yes, that's perfectly clear in terms of the objective. Tony?
Chairman, just a point of clarification, Councillor Nicolai mentioned the tea-deckle houses in his sort of introduction.
Yes.
But I know that the scoping document says that residential properties are not included in the scope. Just I think...
Was that only as an example? You don't
That
actually
was just an
look at
example, really, that we have own or have responsibility for the large property estate. We should be managing it. Let's focus on primarily on the investment properties, but others.
But that's not in scope.
No.
Thank you.
Well, we don't cover TDA.
No, exactly. This is commercial. That's correct. But it was simply an example. Councillor Richard? Councillor Richard? No? Okay, good. In that case, then we accept the scoping document. But one final question. It says here, task initiation date, task completion date in 2017-18. Could you bring that back to the April as a final, but give us a verbal or a brief written in February?
Yes.
Is that reasonable? Thank you. So put you down as a final for April, interim in Feb. Very good, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
I've got one about parking in council estates. But
Sorry,
yes.
Chairman, just to clarify, I'm sorry, I'm looking for it on the scoping document. I found it now. Actually, task members, other members of the panel.
Yes, who you're looking at? Do you know if
I'm
you're
looking at anybody at the moment, so
So you could actually send a note after tonight's meeting
Well,
saying
that's what I was
scoping's like.
thinking. It doesn't have to be just people on this committee, does it?
No, it doesn't. No, in fact, as many people as you'd like, you can mobilise and manage, except portfolio holders.
So that's what I was.
You'd appreciate that. Good. Next one is parking in Daventry Estate. Councillor Ogden was here a minute ago, but we've been having a discussion about this in the background between meetings, and we said we'd put it on the agenda item. Councillor Ritchie, would you like to talk to this subject briefly at all? I know you're very keen on this topic.
Well, I was about to say I've been aware of this problem for a long time. I'm sure we've all been aware of the problems for a long time. I had a lot of dealings with a group of residents in the Headlands, and some of you may recall that they came along to ask a question at a council meeting quite a number of months ago. That was before the last round of elections. I'm pleased that Councillor Lowry, with his county hat on, also managed to get involved to see how it could be pushed forwards. Since then, I know my patch covers the Headlands, Middlemore and Timken, and I have got issues both in Middlemore and Timken, and I'm well aware of past issues in other parts of Daventry. I think we're probably talking mainly about Daventry town. I'm not talking about town centre parking or these sorts of issues, but the issues about can people actually park near their homes in a way that buses and refuse collectors can get past.
So the estate can function according to its...
So it is about parking on the estates. The issue was raised very strongly by a group in the Timken estate who were coming up with a whole number of issues that they felt that needed to be explored. And I think I sent you some of the things that they felt that that Daventry needed to be looking at. How do we actually ensure that people don't park in a manner that doesn't obstruct pavements, obstruct for people who are disabled and so on, dangerous parking at corners. Do we need bylaws that offer a bit of a carrot as well as, a bit of a stick as well as the carrot of saying that, look, we want you to be nice to your neighbours and considerate. There is about how we actually create more parking spaces, because people have got to put their cars somewhere. This too, I think, comes up in the recognition that a lot of issues to do with parking are the responsibility of the county council. The response from DDC when this issue was raised in a question to the council, I think it was about the beginning of the year, when it was raised, it was said, well, it's nothing to do with us. I asked at the time if there was any committee that could consider it, and the response was no, because it's nothing to do with us, and therefore we don't have a committee. But it's not as simple as that. And I think now that we've got to recognise that there's things that we think that the county council ought to do, but we know that the county council hasn't got a hope in hell of doing because of its present situation. And therefore I think it is more pressing that that we as councillors that are interacting with people, same people who have got these problems, don't simply shrug our shoulders and say that it is nothing to do with us. As far as electors are concerned, there is local government. They're not going to be sympathetic to excuses that, well, don't talk to me because this is a county matter. And there are issues in which the county is clear that it is prepared to do things, provided that the funds, the resources are provided by a district council. So it's not clear cut that it is entirely a county matter. And there are things, even if there were things that involve expenditure, like the creation of parking bays or other forms of roadworks to slow traffic. Even if these are things that are technically county things, there are other things that probably don't cost very much at all.
So a whole range
that the district could take a lead on.
Do you mind if I stop you there? Thank you, Councillor Ritchie. I'm going to come to Tony first. So that's kind of set us up for that to work out what...
Yes, Chairman, I noticed Councillor Auger had indicated his intention
to I'll come to him in a sec.
I just wanted to have a quick say before he does, because Councillor Auger, as a portfolio holder, shouldn't be steering Scrutiny. However, he is a county councillor, and if he's speaking in his capacity as a county councillor, I'm sure the committee will be happy to hear his views.
Thank you, Tony, for keeping us in good order. Sorry. Let me come to him in a moment, because Councillor Mick Wright will be up next.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have great deal of sympathy with Councillor Ritchie's observations. I know people on Timken, parking is a problem. The inconvenience of parking there is a problem, but I would suggest the issue around emergency vehicles is even more important than that, because in extremis they could be life or death situations. I would suggest, however, Mr. Chairman, that this is not a question that is just Daventry estates. This is a more general thing, and it affects the villages as well. Long Buckby has serious issues around parking since charges were introduced at the railway station. The neighbouring streets are clogged solid. People are parking on private property without permission. There are also problems in Ravensthorpe, compounded by businesses in the area, and also Little Brington, businesses and the people who work there parking because they have to work there. You don't want to drive businesses away from rural settings. And of course you've got the additional complication in areas such as Great Brington, where you've got heritage issues, because you can't really sort of tarmac it and start putting parking bays in, can you? So I think there is a very valid issue here to explore, but I think we perhaps need to widen it to parking more generally, rather than simply focusing on one or two areas. Although I appreciate that Councillor Ritchie's patch, and that's what's caused him to raise it.
Richworth's another one.
Sorry?
Richworth's another one.
Yeah. So basically, probably wherever you go, there are but some more acute than others. This is with make sure you've got your county hat on.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to get anyone in trouble. I'm really passionate about this, and there's been developments and stuff. But I don't know whether I should say nothing and just go, because I
don't think we need to evict you. I mean, you
know,
have something interesting. Councillor Long used to come and contribute on a county basis.
No, I wouldn't want to get. So if I say something wrong, or someone just tell me to shut up.
Yeah, turn your taste sharp,
Well,
basically.
I think
trouble.
No, I think the point is, Chairman, as S&I committee, you shouldn't be steered by a portfolio holder.
However,
so if Councillor Organ makes himself clear that he's speaking as a county councillor under your invitation, then
he's free to talk, and if he gets too dangerous, we can say. The point is,
could I be quite broad on my feelings about this, or as long as I'm not trying to steer anything?
Yeah, the thing is, we don't want to be steered, but we do need to have some information, because our job is very simple, right? We've been having a discussion about this as an issue of scrutiny. Can we do something, can't we do it? And I think Councillor Ritchie summed it up beautifully. We can't simply sit back while the residents of Daventry, they don't recognise it, it's just an authority issue. And therefore, if you can shed some light on it, because we have to make a decision, do we simply say, thanks Councillor Ritchie, it's off the agenda, or do we do something? That's all we need to know. So can you contribute?
Okay, right. He's absolutely spot on. This is a massive issue, and some work I've been doing with district was
Just say.
all right. The work I've been doing with futures is very much about quality of life issues. It can't only be about this is general, this is strategic. It can't only be about building houses. It's got to be about where we currently have settlements, is making sure that there are quality of life issues. And one of the biggest issues, and it's not only on the Timken, I was down on the Grange today, and there's absolute chaos, double parking, ill-considerate parking, unlawful obstruction. All of these are criminal offences which can be dealt with. You don't need bylaws. You can be dealt with by police enforcement. They are all fixed penalty issues, all of them are. Having in my previous life, we had exactly the same problems, and this was in the middle 1990s, and we simply did education, and then we ticketed the lot. I'll tell you what, ticketed the lot eventually at the design, because £60 a pop is a way of dealing with it.
100 now.
Well, yeah, maybe.
There's some on the road.
So there is a problem. It is to understand the scale of the issue, and there is some work going on with regard to not only the highways parking ratio and evidence to support that, but on piggybacking on that, on the extent of parking problems everywhere. So there are a number of strands. There's also about trying to find bespoke financing for particular projects to try and help alleviate the problem. You're right, the county will never pay for it. The county are responsible for the free flow of traffic on the highways, including parking issues. But as they said to me with regard to a recent problem I had is, we won't build parking bays, we'll just double yellow line the lot. And so of course, if you're going to double yellow line the lot, then just disperse, that's doing their problem, that's their responsibility. It just disperses the problem everywhere else, where do you put the cars? So that can't be the solution. We've got to be more innovative, we've got to have, I think there are a number of strands here with regard to education, general persuasion, enforcement, some physical infrastructures if possible to do that. But to really we just need to understand the bigger problem as to how big the problem is, and then looking at various tactical menu for dealing with it. And I'm not even sure a tactical menu will deal with it totally, but to leave it on the back burner, I feel, is unfair on the residents, because it's an ongoing and a very real problem for the communities, and it's causing quality of life issues. It's not fair. People have to walk in the road.
Thank you, Councillor. We'll take that to your county council resolution for the avoidance of doubt. Councillor McCoy.
I just wanted to say I agree with much of what County Councillor Olga has just said, but I think we need more sophisticated answers to this than simply ticketing in yellow lines. Yes, it may solve double parking on the Timken, but the example I mentioned earlier of businesses in Little Brington, Ravensthorpe, all that will happen is their staff can't come to work. They will move or close down. That helps no one. So I'm not saying I don't know what the solution is off the top of my head, but we need to be imaginative about how we do it.
Thank you. Well, I've got an imaginative proposition here. So, Councillor Pritchard, given that you've finished the project, would you be able to take this one on board but actually work very closely with Councillor Ritchie to put a scoping document together for the next meeting?
Focus being the district rather than Daventry.
For the district, yeah. Not, and again, obviously, you being Braunston, etc. Would that help some? So that will give us the opportunity to give some clear thinking. Again, you can draw upon County Councillor Richard Alger as well as other county, and then present something back to the February meeting. Would that be? Would that please you in terms of us moving the item along?
I can undertake that, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's something that doesn't personally affect me, luckily, in the village, I mean,
Yeah.
but of course it affects
But
others.
Walton actually is the one of yours, and I don't know what it's like there, but...
It does affect a lot of villages. I mean, Stratton has a problem as well, and it's not just the volume of parking, it's inconsiderate parking. So people parking on a corner, because they can, because there isn't a yellow line there, whereas you're not allowed to, technically to park within, is it 10 metres, 10 yards?
Yeah, there's a highway code deals
Yeah.
with where you can park a vehicle, but if you breach that, you're then either unlawful obstruction or inconsiderate.
And I was in Stratton and there's a zigzag lines on the zebra crossing and somebody parked on the zigzag lines and I stopped and I said, you can't do that, it's illegal and dangerous, and they told me to F off.
Oh, that's really bad, I'm saying. Let's
As if it was my fault.
Okay, thank you, good case studies, but...
But what I'm trying to say, what it would demand is people telling me about individual episodes.
As
and how
parish
it's affected
councils.
them.
Exactly.
Parish councils.
Let's open up a new project here then. So basically we're adding to the rolling work programme with an immediate action to come back to the February meeting with a scoping document. Councillor Pritchard, you take the lead, but work very closely with Councillor Ritchie. Obviously because we haven't got the official members, but I know Councillor Ritchie is very passionate about it as well. So okay, great.
Can I just one county council? It's definitely a county council thing with this.
Yes, it is.
As a county council, I was a little bit reluctant about us having two strands, but on reflection and some of the work I've done with regard to trying to get the funding, I think I'm really at a stage where it's make or break over the next couple of months. So I don't think it would have a detrimental effect on the funds I'm trying to raise on the county council parking issue. So, you know, I support those, that sort of and I will offer my support and help with everything with regard to that.
Thank you very much. It's a very valuable contribution again. So I told you it'd be useful for you to be here. February meeting for a scoping document. Let's. I think can we do the witchy now? Because that'll save me a minute. So 9:15, I have to ask for an extension. It's quite customary that I do ask for an extension actually.
Yeah.
Do
you often get one?
Always get one. Let's hope this trend continues. Are we happy to continue for a short while longer? Yep. Councillor Pritchard, okay?
Yeah.
Got to see you. Councillor Pritchard?
Yeah.
Councillor McRae, great. It should be quicker than Councillor Walker's go. Yeah. Thank you very much for your contribution.
I won't get myself in trouble anymore.
There's one final item, actually, the rolling work programme, we also consider for any other options or anything else we'd like to consider. It's not on there at the moment, and again that's the whole point of the rolling work programme. I believe, Councillor Frenchman, you'd like to request a scoping document.
Yes, I might need some officer input to tell me whether I can actually do it. I'm sure you're aware, or perhaps not, there was an issue of planning at the last meeting about affordable housing and viability. And there were some actions that we should undertake as a council to minimise the ability of a developer to wriggle out of their responsibilities to provide affordable housing. And I would like to just look into that. On the understanding that I'm actually allowed to or able to, because obviously it is a planning issue and I know there are some restrictions on some of the elements of that.
Councillor Frenchman always likes a good planning issue. Any issues you'll foresee?
Chairman, I don't see it's a problem in looking at that particular issue. What the restrictions are is looking at the regulatory side of planning. So of course, to deal with a planning application, then that's outside the remit.
This would be DDC policy.
Yes, a policy issue. Yeah. So if that was something the committee wanted to take up, then.
Do you need to give a little bit more background in that, or do we have enough information?
I think there is enough information. Councillor Ritchie was at the meeting as well.
Yeah.
It's just that I noticed you were nodding over.
What a fantastic suggestion.
Good. Okay. So Councillor Frenchman, you'll come back to the February meeting with a scoping document. Yeah. And can you give us a title for that, please, for the agenda?
Let's just broadly speaking. Viability policy.
Viability.
Housing. Affordable housing viability policy.
With respect to planning.
Yes.
Affordable viability.
Affordable housing viability.
Yeah, it's It's developers provide. Let me just think of it. I've just confused myself now. I'm sure what I said the first time was right. Affordable housing viability policy.
We can leave it as that's a good working title.
Yeah.
Good. So this is very busy, so that'll come back scoping document S&I for Feb, and potential final delivery on that one for April 2018.
Yeah.
For final reports.
Chairman, if I can, I'd just suggest that Councillor Frenchman had an early meeting with the community manager to
Yes.
help with the scoping of that.
Yes.
You mean Maria?
Yes.
We know that's always. Let's have this nice and smooth. Thank you. As smooth as possible. We're here to cause a little bit of tension. Right. Let's go on to that's it for the rolling work programme. The next one I'd like to look at is implementation activity, and Tony, I'm going to turn to you on this, please.
Mr. Chairman, I think I'll be fairly quick on this. So in your packs you've got, starting on page 27, you've got the action plans for the task panels and agreed actions to the council. So first one is assignment 10, Rural Economic Role Strategy Task Panel. That has not seen any movement since the last meeting. So we've one action that's ongoing.
Can you, I think it's pretty well illuminated there, but anything further to add, Tony, in addition to the text?
No, not in terms of the detail. What it does occur to me that at some point there needs to be a line drawn under this. So what I can feed back, if it's committee's wish, is that we give an indicative end date for this at our next report.
Yeah, by that you mean if it doesn't happen by that date, it won't happen?
Well, unless there's a clear plan, I would suggest, yeah.
Which actually by definition would mean we couldn't do a 1 year post-implementation review on that actually. Or we could just 1 year post-implementation of those that have been implemented.
Yes.
Yeah, okay, it's practical. Yeah, let's do that then. So you can come back next time with that, if it hasn't happened, okay?
Okay, then moving on to assignment 16, page 31. Again, we've no updates on that, but you'll see the target is April 18. So it's relying on some work we're taking for the General Data Protection Regulation. So we've not got to that point yet.
Yes. Okay, any comments, questions? Should be pretty straightforward, this section. Okay, thank you.
Next then is assignment 17, page 33. And again, there's no update or no significant update since last time. Some of the ongoing actions are still ongoing. But again, like the earlier one, I suggest we need to be getting to a point where we draw a line. So again, if it's committee's desire, I can ask that we provide that update next time.
Yes, please. So to be clear, Tony, we'll put a timescale on it. So basically, if it times out. Yeah. But I'd be interested in the implications of that, I guess, as well.
So, is there any movement on Weedon?
I think there is some discussion.
I understood there to be, yes.
But I don't know the
no, that's
outcome
fine.
of that.
Yeah, that's fine.
Would, in a final, if it starts to time out, could we have an explanation of why that is, actually? Because it's quite interesting, isn't it? So we've been a very long period in terms of the activity, then we've had all the way working for the council, then quite a period of time before it hasn't been implemented. So it'd be quite an interesting shock to the system, I think.
I think, Chairman, it's fair to say there's been ongoing dialogue for many, many years.
I know there's particularly some of those as well, there'll be some as well. Yeah, okay. Anybody else, any comments? No? Okay, thank you, Tony.
Okay, then on to assignment 20.
Sorry, sorry, I didn't realise. But if you look at number 3, the potential for conversion of suitable vacant, you talk about Weedon, but you don't talk about Overston Hall there. So I don't know whether there's any update there either. Because there has been a bit of to-ing and froing in planning game terms, hasn't there?
Yes, Chairman, there has. Again, I don't have that detail, but I can ask for that update for you.
Thank you very much. Please, Tony, for the next one. Thank you. And your final one, Tony, so it's page 35.
Page 35. This is a new one to report back on. This is the DDC Parish Town Council Corporation of Major Planning Applications, which was much more recently through strategy review from Council. But you can see that there's been much delivery, so our recommendations 1, 2 and 3 are delivered. Recommendation 4 is pending, recommendation 5 is delivered, 6 is ongoing, and 7 or 8 are delivered.
Thank you. That doesn't look so bad, that one, does it? Bearing in mind it's quite fresh, aside from 20. And I'll also play the running work programme afterwards on these. Any further comments, Tony, on those ones? No, thank you, Tony, appreciate it. The next item on the agenda is item 9, which is 1 year post-implementation reviews. And because we're not 1 year full past a full set of implementations, that means there is nothing to report on that one. But interesting enough, for those of you not regulars yet, we had quite a glut of those last year, and that caused us quite a bit of work actually, because we were a bit stumped on issues. That brings us to item 10, urgent business. I have nothing to report on this one. And Councillor French.
It's really a query. Are we thinking of somebody to invite to a future meeting?
That's a very good point actually, because Tony, just to remind us, where are we assembling on this one? Has it gone quiet on that?
I think as Philip says, Chairman, they were invited to February. My understanding is they've accepted that.
They've accepted. So remember we discussed SEMLET before.
I did wonder, in the light of the discussion we had with Kevin,
yeah,
whether we could get somebody like the Police and Crime Commissioner there.
Could put that on for potentially April. We can resolve that February actually as a recommendation. Because I think we need to do a little bit of work with the SEMLET one actually about framing that, because it was an invite we had. I might have to send an email around saying that if there's any questions again, I'll do this one. Okay.
Yeah.
But
I'm just throwing it out there as a possibility.
So PCC for April potentially.
Well, I did think I wrote that down as well.
Okay. Tony, could you with Philip have a look into that please, possibly? For April meeting.
So just to be clear, the committee want both of them, or
is both of them too many? Or?
I don't.
Depends on what exactly we're going to ask them.
Exactly, yeah. This just lines it up. We can frame. So, what was your?
I was just thinking in the line of things like Kevin was talking about the statistics and the discrepancy between the actuality and the the perceptions, and what actions the police are doing to maintain visibility in the villages and in the town centre, and various quizzing various people on what we as elected members get quizzed by our constituents about.
That's pretty sure.
And at parish level, you probably come across this as well, the liaison perhaps isn't as good as it could be, because it's very centric around what's in the hall, rather than more sort of outreach.
Yes, we did invite there actually, but okay, let's do that. So we'll put in tentatively PCC April.
Not the Chief Constable.
Not the Chief Constable.
No, the PCC drives strategy, doesn't it?
It does, but in terms of where you see policemen in the course of the day, it's really the Chief Constable's going to know that sort of stuff. Senior police officer.
We can invite them both and hold the meeting in the chamber, and then I'm sure you get quite a lot of people.
Yeah, let's do that. If you could look at that, is that appropriate to ask you for that, Tony?
Yeah, I mean certainly we can make the contact chairman and just say the point about if you're looking at operational issues, then probably you are better to invite the Chief Constable rather than.
Okay. Should we say both? They can take a view on that. Yeah. But the invite is broken. But again, it's to pick up on the Kevin Fagan report basically. And we've got plenty of time to refine all the questions again, like we did for this evening. Good. So that's April resolved, and popping over around about February. I did have it in my notes actually, but go on. Right. Okay. That's it.